If I saw you in the gym on the elliptical from like behind, I would 100% assume you're a woman, and I would begin the lay down game.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you got a fat ass too. I don't mean to sound weird. And by fat, I mean just bulbous and muscly.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. I really hope you didn't flirt with your other guests this much, because I would feel a little bit disappointed. I feel special right now.
Well, you think we're in a relationship now?
I mean, I feel kind of attached. I don't know.
OMW.
Folks, it's me, Dr. Mike, for RP Strength, and I am here with Jake of Data Driven Strength. How important is data anyway?
I mean, not very. Feelings are way better, I think.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
What else is better is having the world's most baller hair.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
It feels great. You know, I knew I was coming here to talk to you, and I was like, there's got to be some minimum effective dose of hair in here somewhere, right?
Which I don't have.
So I went, you know, as far in that direction as I possibly could.
You're carrying us both.
I'm trying my best.
If you would for sure be like either the guitarist or the like lead guy in a metal band.
Yeah.
I could do like the drummer look, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe.
that'd be cool.
Right?
Yeah. Bass?
Sure.
Everyone needs a bass player.
Yeah. Some guy in the back that's bald.
Yeah.
Do your bald thing and shut up about it.
For sure.
All right. Dose response relationship of per session volume on hypertrophy and strength.
Mm-hmm.
First question is, what is the difference between per session volume and what other way of which do we conceive volume for someone who's not technically into this literature and just wants a basic understanding?
Yeah. I mean, it is basic at the end of the day, right? Like most of the volume research, especially like the meta research, has all been on total weekly volume.
Okay.
Like
working sets.
So you could think of that as like just the hard, challenging sets. Usually people think of it, maybe the 6 to 30 rep range or whatever usually gets thrown out there as sort of counting as a set. And, you know, most of the like previous meta-analyses and stuff have looked at total weekly volume, but there hasn't been that on per session volume really yet. There's been a tiny bit, but not much. So that was kind of the next step, I think, in terms of, you know, we have this total weekly volume idea. Now what? Right? Like I need to know what to do today.
Right. I don't train in the week. I train in the day.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is counted in sets per muscle group?
Yeah.
And are you using focused sets only or compounds as well? Is it some combination of both?
Combination. So the meta-analysis that we did is there was a lot that's going on there.
Hell yeah.
And what we did was we calculated volume 3 different ways. So we have the total volume, which is like what previous meta-analyses have done, where let's take your biceps, for example, right? A set of bicep curls and a set of lat pull downs would both each count as one set for biceps because your biceps are active.
Yes.
So we have that. It would be like the total volume. We did just direct sets only, which would be only bicep curls, in that example. And then we also did fractional sets, which would be, again, using that example, a bicep curl would be one set, a lat pull down would be half a set. Thinking of the biceps, you know, indirect in that exercise. And we created statistical models for all 3 of those and then sort of compared to see which one was the best, basically.
Which one explained the data the best and seemed to fit better, huh?
It was different depending on the outcome. So like for the strength outcomes, I was a little bit surprised myself that it seemed like it was the direct sets that explained it the best. And I was a little bit surprised because thinking about, even though in the very short term, hypertrophy and strength are certainly very different things. In, you know, the longer term, I think my bias coming in was that I think hypertrophy probably contributes more. So maybe there's some, you know, volume seems important for hypertrophy. Maybe we'll see some after effect of that in the strength data, but no, it's just the direct sets explained it the best. So that specifically meaning if the strength test is leg press 1RM, we're talking only sets of leg press, right? At that joint angle, or that if it's a 45-degree leg press, for example.
That's the thing that has the tightest correlation to performance improvement on the leg press.
Specificity, right?
It's a good illustration of that.
It really is.
So if I want to get real strong in the leg press, which sounds awkward to say, I can do hack squats and leg extensions and squats. But if I really want to put my money where it matters, I'm going to do much of my volume, if not most of it, on the leg press itself.
Yes and no. If you only care about strength,
That's
specifically in the short to moderate term.
Yes, like in the next
yes.
8 weeks, I have like a high school leg press championship, and the person who wins gets like the cheerleader and the credits roll afterwards.
100%. Then yes, I would do that. Absolutely. Okay. Thinking longer term, I might do some slightly different things, but yeah, for sure.
Of course.
So that's the strength. On the hypertrophy side, it was actually the fractional model that was the best.
That makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
And from that, I gather that, if you are, let's say, doing a arm day and a chest day, but you do lots of pressing on a chest day, that actually does meaningfully help your triceps grow.
Yeah.
In a way we can measure.
Yeah.
And in a way that we know is meaningful because that actually fits the data better than just counting triceps by themselves.
Yeah.
So someone who would say, it doesn't matter if you press, like triceps direct work is the only thing that matters. Like that's actually not true.
Right. For sure. It just doesn't feel true either. Right. Like if you've been lifting yourself or you're coaching or whatever, it's like, there's something going on there. So it was, whenever you go out to do an analysis like this, it's like the data are what the data are, right? We don't want to, we're not really wishing for anything or whatever, but it's hard to not be like, I kind of feel like that's, like that just feels right. And in some weird, unscientific way, it was sort of validating that like and research does that a lot, where it backs up what we've found in just personal experience. And the research is just now catching up. It feels like that's sort of what's happening.
And a lot of people would say like, see, we don't need research because we just knew what was good. Yeah. The problem is they forget a lot of the times where research either disputes and refutes something we thought was true, or puts a level of nuance to it that makes it much more usable and applicable and prevents us from making big errors in judgment.
For sure.
But also the confirmatory research is super important because now we go from having a suspicion that something is true to both practice and science backing it up. Like you can start taking that shit to the bank.
100%.
So when a training philosophy comes out that says, actually, I want to do something completely differently to something that's been research and practice aligned, you're just like, I don't think that's likely to be true. Where if it's just one practice versus another, or one research method versus another, like, I don't know, we haven't really have a consilience on this yet.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So let's talk numbers. I know there's a lot of nuance about this. It's just in the studies that were sampled, mostly recreationally trained undergraduates, so on and so forth. But given that context is maybe a good way to understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but a good starting point for our own training, thinking about our own training, could be the numbers you share on what the dose response seemed to indicate.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Because that's not for sure the right answer.
Right.
And there's so much variation between people that like, if the number's 4, but you start at 3, it's not like, oh, you're a fucking idiot or whatever. Although you may be a fucking idiot regardless.
Might be independent, right?
100%. Yeah. Well, I'm quite dependent on many people. But. So for strength, how many sets per session seem to be the optimal in this group of studies? And also, if I can ask a follow-up question to preempt myself, how much of a variance is there? Like, is the optimal like a very distinct place? Or is it kind of like, well, it's very similar, a little less and a little more? Tell us a story about that.
Yeah, I like how you frame that, first and foremost. I think I would even hesitate to call it like an optimal
the whole
starting point, but like, point. It's I think it's a very reasonable framework to start something in, right? Particularly on the strength side, I think, as a starting point. On the hypertrophy side, I think there's a little bit more wiggle room with it. But basically what we see is the dose response is positive, meaning more per session volume tends to lead to more of the outcome. So I'll start with strength, like you said. So while more volume does tend to lead to greater outcomes, it is more and more uncertain. The higher the volume gets, there's a lot less precision up there, which is mostly just due to the research you mentioned earlier. Like we're bound by the studies that are included in the analysis. So as always, need more research, but we wanted to do this. We wanted to find that number. That was a primary goal, in part because it was informing the design of my dissertation project.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was important. So we wanted to do that. And initially it started out as like, what is the point of diminishing returns? Like, what is that tipping point? And once we actually see the shape of the curve, and if anyone can pull up the paper and you can see all the models, which on that note, the supplementary materials have everything you could possibly want to look at in there as well.
We're going to link that in too.
Yeah. Awesome. All the raw data is there. The R scripts for the analysis is there, everything.
Yeah. I just go straight to code, man. I don't fuck with results.
Yeah. But so we're looking at the curve, and it's like, we sort of realize the idea of diminishing returns is kind of weird anyway, because it's always diminishing, right? Like one set is you get an awesome response, and then it's immediately always less and less.
As soon as you said point of diminishing returns, my like inside pedant voice was like, point? What? Yep. Wouldn't it be great if it was just one point? Like up to here, it's great. And then it just goes like that. Sweet.
Exactly. And that kind of gets it to like, it's not an inverted U. It's just a curve. It's asymptotic, right?
Yes.
So we're looking at this and we're trying to calculate, like, visually you could like, oh, maybe it's here. I don't know. This point where, while it does seem to continue to increase, it's so small and it's so uncertain. Is it really worth it? From a practical standpoint,
right?
Which is a big goal of my whole PhD as a whole, is like, I want it to be very scientifically rigorous, and I want to find, I want to do good work, but at the same time, I want things to be practical for people. Like they can actually use this in the gym, right? That's important. So we're trying to figure this out, and we ended up defining it as like, what value of per session volume do we now have a less than 50% probability that it's going to be superior results?
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. So we have that was objective,
Yes. It's like a point at a party when you're like, should I have another drink to have more fun?
Right.
And your vision's blurred, you're barely speaking. You're like, nah,
it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. For strength, funny enough, it was two sets
working
per session.
sets.
Yeah. Of that specific exercise.
Of that
to be
exercise.
Clear. Yeah.
Which makes a ton of sense when you look at what people actually do in training, because a lot of times especially elite strength training, people will do like sometimes one top set.
Yeah.
And then sometimes like a few and then shut it down and go to assistance work.
Yep.
So like if you guys found that it was like 8, people would be scratching their heads like, fuck, must be because the studies are short term, because the people are too weak to accumulate fatigue.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that.
But like the fact that it's 2 is actually like, damn, like that actually says a lot.
Yeah.
Because of course more is better asymptotically. Maybe 4 is like 10% or 15% better. But man, especially how recovery works in strength training, just like as an athlete myself, former strength athlete, like if you can do 2 and get a big signal, you have all the time and recovery capacity in the world to come back in a few days and hit another awesome 2 again.
100%.
Versus if you hit 4 and like 4 sets roughly fatigues you at least double what 2 does. But if it gets you another like 10% gain in strength, you're kind of like, there must be, because like per session multiplied into frequency gives you some kind of optimal.
That's where this gets interesting. Yeah.
I love it. I'm not going to tell your story for you.
No,
I don't even know what I'm saying.
It's
anymore.
great. Yeah.
Hit it up.
And it also aligns, like, PAC, right? Like PAC's research on minimum
PAC
dose.
sat right there mere weeks ago. Do you feel honored?
There you go. I'm honored to have my butt occupy the same space as his.
Excellent.
But it lines up with his research from his stuff, right? Of all the minimum dose, and we see as little as 1 set a week can give you very meaningful strength gains. And okay, so now it seems even more reasonable from that perspective. And you start thinking about, well, frequency being previously thought as just a way to sort of organize your volume, and maybe it's nice to have it more than once, but not a huge effect. And now we start to think about, well, if such low per session volumes seem to be a really good way to go, then as you said, I don't get as fatigued. Maybe I can train more frequently. I can get more frequent skill practice. And that skill is such a big aspect of strength. And
huge.
It's, so it starts to help you build that program a bit. And if you find yourself able to recover from more and more volume, maybe you find yourself as now you're a high frequency person, right? As long as you continue to recover and perform really well and all that. I almost didn't believe it at first. It was only 2, but then, I think back in my experience coaching too, right? Like, how many powerlifters have I worked with where we're doing 6 sets of squats in one workout. Like not very many.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So yeah, I think it seems to pan out, and it's also sort of good news that less work can give you really good returns. That's always
Great
nice.
news. It's the ego lifter's dream.
So nice.
2 sets and get out of here. It's too much after that.
100%.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's for strength.
Mm-hmm.
What about size?
For size, again, we're thinking fractional sets this time. So the number we found there was right around 10 fractional sets per session. So again, using our biceps as an example, maybe you did 8 sets of back already. You could sort of count that as 4 bicep sets. So then you might do another 6 sets of curls or something. If you want to reach that top end, I think a key thing to mention, 10, even a workout like that can be a lot for a lot of people, right? We do that multiple times a week, can be a lot. So while for strength, I think starting at 2 is awesome. If we want to start at 10 for hypertrophy, might be beneficial to try to work your way up to that.
Start at 6.
Start lower.
Yeah.
If you recover really, really well, sweet, add 1, right? Use sort of an auto-regulated approach to fine tune that number, which again, I feel like I keep talking about. I didn't mean to turn this into my dissertation thing, but
no, by all means.
That's sort of what my project is about, is fine tuning per session volume through auto-regulation. And so,
oh man, that's exciting.
Yeah. Oh dude, I can't wait. It's awesome.
I started yapping about that way before we had any data.
Why do you think I'm doing it? Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's
to prove Mike wrong.
Exactly. We don't want expectations of the data except when it's to prove you guys wrong.
Of course.
But no, I mean, in all honesty, all the stuff that you have been talking about for a long time, and it just seems like it works pretty good and it's pretty logical, and there's not like direct data on it. And you've said that from day one, right? And so that was a big goal for me. It was like, let's see what's up.
Sure.
Sure. But yeah, I think working your way up is probably a good idea. Cause you also consider that's for one muscle group, right? So if we're even a push day, we're going to do that for chest. We're going to do it for triceps. Like it adds up really quickly. And then, you think about even the limitations of the analysis itself, right? Like there's just so much gray area that this number is certainly better than nothing. And it's in my opinion, the best thing that we have so far, despite the limitations. But certainly starting low and working your way up, I think, is the way to go.
Yeah. And there's not a ton of downsides to that. Because if
There's
you're
not.
like, oh, this isn't super stimulative, you can always go up.
I say that to clients all the time, that they're like, I could do more. And I'm like, I know you can, right?
Later.
Like all due respect, I know you can. That's part of the plan,
Yes.
right? We want to start here and then we'll add as needed. It's so much easier to do that
Yes.
than it is to run into a wall and have to pull right back.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Because if you start too high, someone could say like, well, you just go lower, but you've already paid the fatigue cost.
Now you got to deload early.
100%. It's like if you want to buy a new tech gizmo, like, I don't know, a new VR headset.
Okay.
To masturbate with, just
Sure.
to be clear.
As you do.
As one does when presented with a VR headset. And so if you buy a fucking not so amazing entry level model, you've never used a VR headset before, and you love it, you can just save a couple of extra dollars and then you love it. So you're going to buy the fucking awesome, gnarly one later. But if you buy the $1,100 one and you just don't like how it fits on your head and you hate the idea of a VR headset altogether, you just didn't know, you can always like just get rid of it, but you're shit out of luck on $1,100 fucking dollars.
Yeah.
There's like a cost there.
Big cost.
And so if you overdo it at the beginning of a mesocycle, you have to like walk it back and mini deload, some kind of recovery shit. You could get hurt too, because we have pretty compelling literature from across sports that one big session of volume predisposes you to a higher injury probability than like just out of the blue.
Sure.
So it's really like there's no glory to starting easier at all.
There's really not.
Nope. But you get the glory on the back end for when you finish an awesome mesocycle and you did amazing and you just linearly progressed versus like just stumbling through the shit.
100%. And you even think about like beginners, they're just starting out, right? It might completely ruin their experience with lifting and they just don't want to do it anymore. And how horrible is that, right? So, there's just like you said, there's no downsides. There's really only benefits there.
Yeah, 100%. All right, dude, that was super awesome. So as far as kind of take home messages for the folks listening at home, one from me, correct me if I'm wrong, is if you're training for strength versus hypertrophy, if you're doing those independently, not in an integrated program, that's going to look like a fucking different program.
Yeah.
Very different program, which is why elite powerlifters versus bodybuilders out in the wild, the powerlifters like take 3 hours to do a few sets and then they leave. And the bodybuilders like just crank.
Yeah.
And that makes sense now why like, actually, yes, that is a research supported practice. And then if we were going to integrate the two into one training session, I suppose a good way to do it would be to get a few heavy sets in for strength work and then kind of like fill in the rest with lighter volume. What do you think?
I think so too. While being cautious with the rest of that hypertrophy work to make sure that you don't generate so much fatigue that you then pay the price in your next session.
Okay. So
it's a balance.
I have to ask, you are one of the only researchers that has ever said that.
Okay.
It's been like me, you, and like 2 other people, because that claim that fatigue will cost you in the next session is not directly supported by research. I think a lot of people do that absence of evidence is evidence of absence kind of thing, which is not.
Yeah.
At the same time, we have to be respectful of the research process and say like, we don't know anything. This is a hypothesis as coaches, as athletes. So when you say that, are you just quoting my earlier bullshit, or do you yourself blindly, as a coach, my man, Scott, we got another cult follower. So we're going to have you drink this drink. Now doesn't have psychedelic drugs in it, but it's going to feel like it does.
Oh, got it. Okay.
We're going to give you your phone. You're going to give us your banking passwords.
Okay. Deal.
Just a test. We're not really going to take any money out.
Okay. I trust you.
Of course, my man. Part 2 of being in a cult. Total trust.
Total.
There was like the Heaven's Gate cult, I think back in the day, Marshall Applewhite or whatever was his name that led it. And if you look at a picture of his phone, Scott, who edits these podcasts?
Alex, probably.
Alex, throw up a picture of the Marshall Applewhite Heaven's Gate guy. When you look at his face, you're like, you look like a cult leader because he's totally insane, gigantic eyes. And he's like, and you're like, anyone who like believed you, like, hey, do you want to come to our ceremony? You're like, no. Like anyone who says yes, like you had it coming.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, but fuck. In any case, outside of just my bullshit, you seemed pretty convinced that a lot of, because here, let me paint a quick story. A lot of people, when you say, okay, do the strength work first, then hypertrophy after, they're like, so that's it, fucking problem solved. And to me, as like a former powerlifter and a current bodybuilder, I did that for years. And what I realized was like, if I ever pared back on my hypertrophy work, my strength training exploded because I showed up so goddamn fresh the next day and day after. Did you get that experience as a lifter yourself and as a coach painfully through trying the other way?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
100%. Yeah, it was the same. I mean, I started I first started out just trying to look like Goku and Vegeta, right? That's the goal.
That's the 98% of us lift for that 100%. Reason still. Yeah.
And then I found powerlifting. I was like, okay, I'm a powerlifter, but I still like this hypertrophy thing.
Yes.
So I took that very approach, right? Of just, let me get my strength work done and then we just blast whatever, leg press, hack squat, leg extensions, whatever.
All of it.
And then I'm like, why is my squat not really going up a ton? Like it's going up, but I'm not that experienced as a lifter. It should be a little faster, I think. And, I have that very same experience where maybe I missed a workout for whatever reason. I was sick or something.
Yeah.
Or, you sort of accidentally stumble across it, or at least I did. I wasn't smart enough to put it together and try it purposefully.
Me neither for like a decade.
Yeah. And I mean, eventually you figure it out. It's like, man, that kind of makes perfect sense. Like,
yes.
Strength is so, it's dependent on a lot of things. And I think of primary importance is your readiness to perform.
Yes.
Whereas hypertrophy, like you can be beat to hell and still get a really effective workout.
Yep.
Like, so
it's really part of the game.
It kind of is. Yeah.
People are like, I'm sore. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah. And even like you said, again, the research is kind of catching up, like dose responsive volume, closer to failure you get, probably better. All those things are really fatiguing. So as long as you are, constraining things to a degree that you can still recover pretty well.
You can still at least like match or beat your numbers from last week.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be putting hundreds of pounds on your back and grinding out shit because it's not part of the thing.
Yeah, it's just not. But for strength, very much is part of the thing, right? So that was, I hazard to guess that someday research may back that up as it kind of has caught up to some other things. But purely from my experience and then with coaching, with, a lot of people they want to be strong and jacked, right? So not everybody, a lot of people want that.
Of course.
And for so long I was like, man, power building, that's the, minimum dose strength and then blast hypertrophy. And I was like, are you optimizing both at the same time? Maybe not, but you're pretty close. I don't know. Over time, I've kind of shifted on that a little bit to where you don't have to be all one or all the other, but I think you're making a bit more of a compromise, I think, for strength if you're trying to do a lot of hypertrophy.
Yes.
So it's not perfectly a two-way street, I think, in that way. But
yes. And there's a potential way in which you can compromise hypertrophy in relation to strength, and it's time and especially like psychological and systemic fatigue. Like if you warm up, psych up, ramp up for 2 or 3 sets of really heavy low bar squats, you're like an hour or 45 minutes into your workout. And then one does not simply do 10 sets for quads and hams respectively. And you're just going to fucking be like, nah, fuck this. And you'll do 5. You're like, I got a good pump. I got a good hit. And you did. Yeah. But it's not the same. If the way I put this in when I was talking to Josh, also of Data Driven Strength, is like, if you have a bodybuilding show or a powerlifting meet coming up, hybrid training ain't it. Because when 100%. It really matters, nobody gives a fuck how big your biceps are on the powerlifting platform, and no one cares what you squatted yesterday on a bodybuilding stage. So it's a matter of like recognizing that this is a relatively closed system. You push one axis up, the other one goes down. 100%. So it's up to you to play the balance, which means you can always train a hybrid way. But when it's really important for you to make gains on one versus the other, like it's time to turn the dial. Yeah. Excellent way to say it. All right. Next topic is about the accuracy of people judging their proximity to failure and what people can do to potentially improve their accuracy. Yeah. That second part is unique, and you're the only person I've ever talked to who's actually surmised that there is that second part. Most people just leave it as a controversy or just explain what's going on. We'll definitely do that. Sure. I'll also say that this topic may be one of the most controversy generating and polarizing discussions you could ever have on social media. Views. Let's go. Okay. Let's go. Scott, new thumbnail title: Heavy Metal Rocker says you're not training hard enough, comma, and are dumb. So with that in mind, what is, real quick for the folks tuning in, what is proximity to failure? Why is it something we have to judge and can't just measure directly? And why does it matter at all? Yeah. So proximity to failure, meaning when you stop a set, whatever exercise that you're doing, how close to failure are you? Yep. Proximity to failure, right? No longer being able to lift in good technique in that exercise. Like the curl bar stops here and you're like, and like, no, you failed. Yeah. Okay. And I would say like whatever technique that you determine. So if you say, I'm going to keep going and I'll do length and partials until I can't even move the barbell anymore. Cool. Sweet. But it's whatever you determine to be the range of motion, whatever you're going to use. So it matters because it seems to impact the outcome, right? Especially with on the hypertrophy side, it seems especially important that we have a paper from our lab that shows that the closer to failure you get, the more hypertrophy you get on average. All other things being equal, kind of thing. Yeah, there's some limitations with that analysis, of course, like anything else. But and we've talked about that a bunch. I'm sure people can Google that and find it. Just Google Zach Robinson proximity to failure meta-analysis. It'll pop right up. Hold on, bro. That's a lot of words. How do you spell Zach? I'm kidding. That's true. But yeah, so it seems to really impact the growth that you get. And the reason that you might hear that and you might say, well, why don't I just go to failure on everything? Because then I don't have to measure it and I get the most hypertrophy. Fair point. But that is there's so much more fatigue that you need to consider there, even compared to like 1 or 2 reps in reserve. Yes. Right. Like, so it can be a big difference. That I do think that there is a training effect there to you sort of adapt, and it's not as fatiguing over time. And, you can train closer to failure on average than you probably think you can. I have some ideas about that real quick. One is I think it's absolutely true that you accommodate to it and you can do it better. The other thing is I think people find ways totally subconsciously to get to a point where it feels like they're failing and they really are.
Yes.
but they used to free the beast and they don't free the beast anymore.
Yes.
And so what you used to consider failure is like, you think about how your mom just mistreated you when you were a child and you cry while you're on the leg curl.
Yep.
I have a video of me doing that. And then, okay, that's real failure. But then as you do failure for more time, both at a subconscious level, your body's like, I had to keep myself alive. This fucking idiot's going to kill us all.
Yeah.
And all the cells of my body are going to die. And also maybe at a more conscious psychological perspective, you're kind of like, man, there's only so many of those reborn workouts I can do. So you end up just doing this kind of like kind of failure. And that really is like what your old 2 or 3 RIR was. Because you can always dip back into that clown show part of your brain that like gets the shit fucking juices going. So I think the adaptation is a skill and lets you push harder without as much fatigue. But I also think in some respect, you're actually not pushing as hard. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think it's even more reason to make sure that you don't go to that dark place every time. Right. It burns you out pretty quick.
Burns you out.
Yeah. So being able to either, like you said, kind of modulate, like, how am I defining failure today? I think that's feasible. I think that's certainly feasible. But a lot of people, at least in my experience, again, just lifting, coaching, observing people, whatever, there's certainly a benefit to, it seems, having further from failure sets be a predominant thing that you're doing. Maybe you get closer to failure throughout a mesocycle or something like that.
Yes.
And when you're stopping shy of failure, we need to, when do I stop? How do I know?
Right.
You know, which is again why it's also beneficial to go to that true failure sometimes, so you can anchor the feeling
where you're going.
Yes.
Yes. I guess the big benefit of submaximal sets theoretically, like 2 RIR, is that in a bunch of the research, especially for hard training advanced people, 1 or 2 RIR is very similar in gains to failure, even though there is a linear benefit there.
Yeah.
But the benefit is linear, while the fatigue difference between 2 RIR and true failure is like exponential. And so what you end up doing is, if you go to 1 or 2 RIR on average in a plan, you can do like substantially more sets and still recover just the same as if you took fewer sets to failure.
Yeah.
And because we know that the incremental approach of failure training or incrementally approaching failure yields like a little bit more growth, but we know that adding a substantial number of working sets usually generates a lot more growth. That like if you can do 5 sets to psychotic failure, but 10 sets to 2 RIR, and they get you the same level of fatigue, that 10 sets is going to grow you like 1.5 times more. Whereas the psychotic failure, 5 sets for 5 sets, is only maybe like a 5 or 10% increase. So big differences there.
It's crazy. And that's like one of the things I think about the most when writing programs for people is we have to pick one to prioritize, right? Like if we're doing all this crazy to failure stuff, it can be fun for sure. But if it sabotages how much volume you can do by just a tiny bit, probably worth it. But if it by a lot, probably not super worth it. At least that's my current thoughts on it. We actually are, that's something that we want to try to do some work in our lab, as well as trying to figure out how do we
so important.
It's also incredibly difficult to design studies for
sure.
But we'll get there hopefully. But yeah, so if we're asking somebody to stop shy of failure, and we need to know when to like, let's say I ask you to stop at 2 reps in reserve, like you said, right? Which I think is a very good practical recommendation for people. Super close, based on our paper that showed that dose response, like we talked about. If you look at all the effect sizes, you're still growing even up to like 10 reps in reserve, right? So you stop 2 or 3 away, you're growing a ton still.
Almost as much as you would go in a failure.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're doing that, we got to know when to stop. We got to have confidence that we're stopping relatively close. Does it have to be perfect on the dot, exactly 2 RIR? I don't think so.
No. And I almost like, obviously certainty is not for scientists, but I almost know it's not so. Because if you want to tell a story about how it matters a lot, I'm going to tell you an addendum to your story, which is, okay, next week, go a little harder. So you just fixed your problem. Just like the whole volume situation is like, just do a little more, solves itself, self-solving problem. You just always aim for the sun. Wherever you start, you just go closer to the sun. You'll eventually get burned. No problem. For sure. That's what you want.
Yeah. And that's one of the takeaways, I think, like if you care about hypertrophy only. Strength, I think, is a little different. Hypertrophy only, if like err on the side of undershooting it a little bit, and then just as you do the progressive overload thing, solves itself.
Yep.
Right. So there's really no reason to
unless
stress
you get
out.
infinitely strong for forever.
Sure.
And then you have like another problem to solve. Like, what is existence anyway? You know, you got like a blue arc in your fucking.
Exactly.
That's what I really wanted out of training. It just never happened.
Yeah, that's too bad. That's too bad.
I just got more of not laid still.
Yeah, relatable.
Stop. With hair like that, stop.
It doesn't work.
You don't have to dip down to my level. Scott, you hearing this motherfucker be all fucking bashful and shit? Fuck up out of here.
You make me shy, Mike. This is, you know.
Well, I can still see the fucking female ejaculate gleaming on your face from 5 constant nights of groupie sex.
Yeah,
Stop.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. I don't even remember all that, to be honest.
Yeah, I blacked out.
I never remember their names.
Nope.
Okay, so I want to know how to judge closer to failure versus not.
Mm-hmm.
And I do understand I can start a little further away, but I want to start a little closer to my target. Like
Sure.
I want 3 reps in reserve. What kind of things do you recommend that I can do to get my shit sharper?
Yes. So the good news is, on average, people aren't horrible at gauging it anyway. There was a meta-analysis from 2022 from Halperin that on average, right? So again, there's a bunch of noise in there, but people are accurate within like 1 rep, right? Which is pretty darn good.
People that have lifted before.
Yes.
That's a big deal. I remember talking to Eric Helms, and I had one of these clown show moments where I was like, oh, well, people are pretty bad at estimating failure. He's like, oh, yes. Oh, when they're untrained. But when they're trained, they're actually quite good. And I'm like, shut up, Eric. I know things. I'm a scientist too.
Yeah.
And he watched me cry and just didn't do anything about it, man. He didn't even hug me or anything.
That was when you two were mortal enemies at the time.
We've been mortal enemies before.
Yeah.
Well, there's since been
those podcasts were fun.
A shaky alliance.
Yeah.
Because like, obviously I'm a Sith Lord and he's absolutely like, he's Captain America.
Yeah,
so,
of course he is.
Okay. So for people who have trained consistently, the idea that people are really bad at estimating failure is just not true. On average.
For the most.
Oh, obviously some people are just wacky.
Yeah. And
some people that are robots.
There are situations where you tend to be more or less accurate. And I will also say there is some data in my undergrad. I brazenly asked if I could go lead my own study, and they let me for some weird reason.
That's fucking sweet.
Yeah, it was my last semester of undergrad.
Where did you go to undergrad?
Illinois State.
Dude, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, Dr. Larson, shout out to him because he let me do whatever I wanted. It was cool. But so he
was like leaving the next year, like retirement. He's like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, he was the man. But I did a study on this, right? Because I was like, well, there's not really much data on untrained people, and that matters a lot, right?
Sure.
And what I found there was they came in, they did 3 different exercises, 4 sets to failure. And we looked at they would call out certain RIRs in each set, and we looked at how accurate they were, right? And on their very first set, never lifted before, right? Way off. They're off by, I asked them to start predicting at like 5 RIR, and they said 5 and they did 12 more or whatever, right?
Crazy shit.
On average, which means some people did 15 more, some people did 3 more, right?
You ever spot like female lifters that just keep going?
Dude.
And you're like, I kind of want the set to end because I have to like go to class. She's still squatting, and I said I'd spot her, and here I am. And you're like, 1 more, and she grinds it, and you're like, all right. And she's like, breathes in again, goes down, hits another one. You're like, all right, I don't even want to tell you anything anymore. I have no idea where this is going.
It's so a quick story on that same topic. We have for my dissertation, one of these subjects in a previous semester, her ability to grind through slow reps is a level that I have never, ever in my life seen. Like, you take the most hardcore dude, bro, lifter, whatever, he would have gave up 6 reps to go.
Yeah.
It's just like, we use the tonal for a lot of, because we don't lift for real anymore. We just use tonals. Of
course.
And so she's doing this rep that's like,
isn't that
barely
wild?
Anything. And then she'll do 3 more.
Yes.
This is unreal.
Where is the energy coming from? Where is the willpower coming from?
It blows my mind.
You thought you were a man, and afterwards you're like, I ain't shit. I'm a quitting loser.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, so their first set, they're way off, right? But then set number 2, super close. Set number 3, they nail it. And I think it's because they have that anchor now, right? And they literally just did it. They know what it feels like. Also, they're probably doing less reps in those subsequent sets.
Yes.
And as we know from that meta-analysis, the less reps you do in a set, the easier it is to judge.
Yep.
Probably related to, it's just less, high rep sets are super uncomfortable. And you try to, sets of 20 of leg extension.
You can always kind of do one more.
You can always do one more.
And it comes down to mentality.
Yeah.
But with like a set of 6, when it stops, it stops.
It stops. Yeah, exactly.
You ain't in charge anymore.
100%. Yeah. So it could be from that, but what that project kind of illustrated to me was I was like, wow, I expected untrained people to be horrible at this, but they got the hang of it super, super quick. And when we go and do the analysis, and on average, the accuracy was really good.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a point to report their set 1 accuracy separately, because like if we just put the average out there, it's kind of misleading.
Some studies bring people in and just have them do one set and then have them report on IR.
Yeah.
And to say, well, beginners are bad at IR, like people who literally lifted for the first time ever, you mean? Yes, I can believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, which to me is very good news for people just getting into this, or for coaches who work with a lot of newbies and stuff, right? That you can still use this to program, and they might feel like they're not great initially, but they'll get the hang of it super quick. But let's say you are somebody who finds yourself in that position where either you don't feel like you're very good at it, or maybe you are doing something that the programming itself doesn't really lend itself to great accuracy. So for example, maybe you are doing some sets of 20 on stuff. Maybe you are stopping really far from failure for some reason, like for strength training.
Sure.
There's certainly lots of places for stopping sets with 5, 6, 7 reps in reserve for strength. And it's just harder to judge those things.
Yes.
So some of these strategies can be helpful, right? As we mentioned earlier, the hypertrophy is pretty straightforward.
Yep.
If you want to give yourself the best starting point possible, maybe err towards the side of slightly lower reps.
Yes.
Maybe an exercise that you're a little bit more familiar with. Maybe you make sure you do more than one set, right? Just things that are shown, particularly in that meta-analysis, which is just valuable because it pools everything together, right? Gives us a better idea that allows for a bit more accurate ratings on average. And then you do the progressive overload thing, try to beat the logbook a little bit. You're going to get closer to failure anyway. You're going to get that feel, you're going to get that anchor, and it solves itself. Mm-hmm. For strength, it's kind of harder to do that, right? Because you probably do still want to add some load to the bar, but you want to keep it further from failure. That same meta-analysis that we had on the proximity to failure, dose response, hypertrophy, that we've been talking about here and there, we also looked at strength outcomes with that. And it was kind of showing proximity to failure didn't seem to matter, at least when that's moderated by the reps that you're doing, right? If you're getting closer to failure because you're adding load to the bar, probably a good thing because load's important. But if you're just doing more reps at the same load, getting closer to failure doesn't seem to help with strength.
Sure.
So like, why not stop further from failure, save the fatigue, get the same strength gain?
Sure.
Awesome.
But how do you tell?
How do you tell? So what I have done a lot of, and this is purely based on just lifting and coaching experience, right? There's not really research on this. So for what it's worth, is leaning more on either prescribing exact loads for the lifter or a personalized key point, personalized percent 1RM for a certain rep target. So I might go in and I say, okay, for your back off sets on bench press, I'd like you to stay 5 or 6 reps away from failure, whatever, right? So that's what I have in my head. And I will tell them, do sets of 5 at 75% of today's estimated 1 rep max. Do that, record a video, send it to me, tell me how many reps in reserve you feel like you had. And I look at that data, and if I see that and I'm like, they definitely had 10 more reps. Mm-hmm. Well, then next week I just increase the percentage, right?
Sure.
Or if they hit failure, okay, next week I need to decrease the percentage. But over time, you just do that enough times, you create like a profile for somebody of individualized percent 1RM for a rep target, certain RIR, which those tables they're out there, but they're not personalized. And they can be kind of problematic, right? Just different people are going to be able to do a lot different reps at a given percent. So
different exercises.
Yeah. So it can be a lot of work to kind of like tabulate all that stuff, but it's so worth it. But if you want to save that work, just doing exact loads can kind of get you in the same spot, sure. Right? It's the same idea. You just tell them, okay, do 215 pounds or whatever. And
you give them the reps too.
Yeah. Rep target. Here's the load. Send me a video or if I'm very confident that like their technique isn't, their reps in reserve isn't low because they misgrooved a rep or whatever. So depending on the person, maybe you ask for both or one or the other or whatever, but video and subjective RIR ratings, use that as feedback, adjust the load you ask them to use, and it works pretty well that way.
And that's basically the core recommendation there.
That's what I would do. Yeah,
Sure.
It seems to work. And it takes a little bit of time to dial it in sometimes. But which again, like the volume, start low.
Yes.
So it's so much easier to add it next week.
Yes. So basically keeping track of stuff, trying to put metrics to things instead of going on vibes is probably a good idea for
Data,
estimating.
Right?
Data-driven
strength.
God damn, it just explains itself.
There you go.
I love it. All right, next topic. The necessity of pre-workout carbs.
Yeah.
For one of two things, maybe a combination. One is to curb hunger pre-workout, and the other is to fuel performance.
Yeah.
I have my suspicions of how this plays out, but I guess I'll just set up the kind of basic framework. Is there's a continuous debate in sport nutrition that is to the tune of, okay, we know that eating food helps you move weight around and get more jacked or play your sport. And we know that carbohydrates are particularly well utilized for energy production, anti-catabolism, and a variety of other really good things that just seem to comport with like, it's sport food.
Sure.
You should eat it before sports or lifting or whatever. And we also know that there are kind of two primary ways in which the muscles are fed when they're lifting or moving around. One is from glycogen stores internally accumulated that are there from like even what you ate the day before, mostly what you ate the day before. Right. And if you don't eat carbs right before a workout that starts at 11 a.m., it's not a big deal maybe because you get a lot of energy from that glycogen that's stored up in the days before. As long as you're eating plenty of carbs all the time, you're not in a deficit, you're going to be good to go.
Yep.
But the other thing is, well, now hold on, maybe there's a blood glucose effect where you eat carbs in the meal before, your blood glucose will be a bit higher. And we know that under some circumstances, that blood glucose is pulled in for energy for cells, even while they're contracting, like muscle. And so maybe it's a net benefit to eat carbs, sure, in the days before, but also notably better, maybe, to eat them in a meal before, let that meal settle, and then go do the thing.
Yeah.
And the third concern there is like, even if your glycogen is super full and stocked up, but you didn't eat anything that day before you went to go train, maybe you're going to be hungry. And maybe your body has like a deeply evolved mechanism for like when you're hungry, it doesn't really give a fuck about anything that's not like leading food to get to your stomach. And so if you're trying to try hard on lifting while hungry, your body's like, dude, stop, go get a cheeseburger. Then we can go try.
Yeah.
For that being the baseline, let me know if I missed anything. Where are you coming at this problem from?
Yeah. I mean, I think that lines it up really well. And I think that, you know, we have all of that stuff that I think tells the story. But we need to know then, do those things actually play out in the real world, right?
Theory's nice,
sure,
but we need to test shit.
Yeah. And I think that it's 3 studies in 3 years in a row that I think tell this story beautifully. Okay. All by the same group, Naharudin, who did all 3 of these. The first one was in 2019, and it's 2020, 2021. The first one, well, I should say this to set it up. For all 3, they had the same design, right? Subjects would come in, have some sort of pre-workout meal or lack thereof, and then do 4 sets of squats, 4 sets of bench press, and they tracked reps performed across all those sets, right?
Great.
Nice
Very
simple.
Excellent acute test of work capacity.
Yeah, nice and simple. Can we say that translates to long-term outcomes? Not necessarily.
But we're not even claiming that.
We're not.
Like, we're confident enough to say good workouts translate to good things.
Yeah.
And if a nutritional strategy dependably leads to better workouts, there are absolutely ways in which that can not matter, but there are probably more ways in which that can probably help.
Right.
Like if you tell someone like, hey, did you know that eating like this will give you more workout energy? And they're like, I don't care. You're like, okay.
Yeah. It's just kind of silly, right? It just doesn't feel right.
Very well.
Yeah. So in this first study, what they did is they had people either eat this standardized breakfast that had a bunch of carbs in it or just drink water. Shockingly, the people who ate breakfast on average performed better, right? They got more reps across these sets.
God, that's got one of those 1980s food guide pyramid, Tony the Tiger type of vibes. Like eat breakfast and you'll be great at lifting, kid.
Yeah. So we have that. Some food with carbs better than water. Cool. No one's surprised. Then the next year they come in and they have similar breakfast, a lot of carbs, right? All this stuff. They have the water, but then now they have what sounds really gross, a placebo meal that has no calories, but it's matching the as close as you can,
The
the
volume.
texture and the volume of the meal, right?
Scott, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Hey, you've been looking, I don't mean to get weird here, but
Mm.
you've been looking kind of fat lately, Scott.
I know.
And I think you need more placebo meals, you fat motherfucker.
I would love some.
Please.
I would love some.
a new like nutrition bar comes out, placebo meal.
Yeah.
You look at it, it's like zero, everything. You're like, oh my God, they did it.
Sounds horrible.
Sounds terrible.
My GI tract would hate it. I already know. It'd be bad.
You can lose more weight that way.
That's true. That's true.
All sugar. All right. So placebo meal.
Placebo meal.
What a trip. I knew they had placebo drinks,
Mm-hmm.
but placebo meal is a trip.
It's weird. It's super weird.
I'd love to, I got to go read the study. It's like to see what the fuck it actually is.
Yeah, it's if I remember correctly, I think it was some kind of weird like gelatinous, like I think it was trying to simulate like oatmeal sort of. Yeah, it sounds gross. I don't want it.
Multiple
but-
subjects refused the meal.
Yeah.
All
The
right.
dropout rate was just ungodly.
Okay.
But
All right.
but we have high carb meal, 0 calories, 0 carb, placebo meal, water. The two meals both outperformed water. No significant difference between the two meals. Right. So that then to me, well, maybe it's not the carbs, right? Maybe it's just eating something.
I've heard colloquially coaches basically talk about like getting something into their athletes before they do their training.
Yeah.
Get some food in you.
Yeah.
And
Something.
the more nuanced coaches are like, oh, high carbohydrate diet,
Uh-huh.
but just get something in your stomach.
Yeah.
Seems to have at least a little bit of evidence for it now.
It seems it does. And then the third study kind of does the same thing, right? Now we have a sort of semi-solid, think oatmeal kind of meal, right? And a liquid meal that has the same amount of carbs in it, right?
Beautiful
So now we're
study
matching
design.
exactly,
oh
right?
my God, so great.
And the semi-solid meal outperforms the liquid one because it's more filling probably. So I love those 3 studies in a row because it really just leans into that whole like, man, just don't be hungry and distracted, right? You
Yes.
probably don't have to have a bunch of carbs. I will say there was a paper from King was the lead author
Sweet name.
on, is a great name. He was working out in AUT with Dr. Helms, and they did this meta-analysis on this, do pre-workout carbs help? And they found, on average, yes, especially for longer, harder workouts, it seems to work.
And we've known that for some time.
Of course. But they did make a note, like, we don't know why. We don't know the mechanism. Is it the carbs? Is it something else? And I think now I certainly lean more towards that direction of like, just don't be hungry and distracted, right? And maybe you're somebody who you wake up first thing in the morning and your schedule is such you got to go lift right away.
Yeah.
You don't have time to do anything else, right? As long as you're not hungry and thinking about other stuff, like if you can focus on the gym, you're probably just fine,
Because some people don't get hungry in the morning.
I don't.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
And like I can train fasted, no fucking problem in the morning.
sure.
If you got me to train fasted at 5 p.m.,
Nightmare.
I'm training my way to a fucking vending machine.
Yeah, it's not good.
That is incredibly insightful.
Yeah, it's cool.
So now we have some reason to believe, not definitive,
Mm-hmm.
that there's a good probability that carbs, especially for longer, harder workouts, have some kind of actual effect.
Mm-hmm.
But now we also have some decent reason to believe that the degree to which your stomach feels full of food might have an independent effect to liberate your energy to go and do the lifting thing and all that other stuff productively.
Yeah.
So as a kind of mechanism for folks watching or listening at home, I assume no one ever watches or listens from work because you're supposed to be at work.
Sure.
Though many of our commentators are like, I'm at work watching this, ha. I'm like, do your job, motherfucker. The world counts on you. He's like a nuclear facility controller.
Yeah.
He's like watching Dr. Mike talk about masturbation, the fucking plant's collapsing.
Yeah.
But the investigative committee is like, what were you doing when the plant was collapsing? He's like, I actually just blame RP Strength for this.
Yeah.
We get sued into the ground.
Uh-huh.
But if you are one of those people that over indexes on super nitty gritty stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you just come to realize that when I'm hungry, I don't perform well.
Mm-hmm.
And that if I can't get my hands on a perfect macros carb meal, but I'm in the fucking gas station and they have fucking beef jerky and it's going to quell my hunger and then I have to lift in an hour, that seems to be like way better than just going in hungry and miserable.
Yeah.
And do you feel in a sense, like, especially for powerlifting and heavy lifting, when I have a completely empty stomach, I feel empty all over. You feel like you're curved in on yourself, like a skeleton. But when you got a good little meal in you, you're like, you're like ready to fucking
you can brace
put that
so much
belt
better.
on. Yes.
Yeah. 100%. We used to, like, me and my friends when I was powerlifting, we'd go out and get Chipotle or Qdoba or something like that before we go to squat, which is a risky game, but you need a fair window of time to not throw up.
You need a window of time. What was your window of time? I'm curious.
If I have 2 hours, I'm good.
Yo, that's facts. Okay, great. That works.
We're good.
I thought you were like 30 minutes later.
If I'm benching, I can do that.
For sure.
But yeah.
No, squatting, good God.
It's risky.
You're like, the guys are like, let's do some volume. You're like, set 3 of 8 rep squats. You're just like vomits coming out of your nose.
Yeah, it's not the move.
I had a chance way back when, way before I was Dr. Mike or whatever, to lift with Dave Tate up at the Elite FTS headquarters.
Sweet.
And we went out to, I was there with a friend. We went out to lunch first, and him and Dave discussed business. It was like a business thing. And it was like Bob Evans, like restaurant.
I love Bob Evans.
That was great.
Yeah.
Fucking America built on Bob Evans. And I just don't know what's going on timing wise. And they're there, and Dave's going to lift, and my friend Mike was going to lift, and they're having full on meals. And so I was like, fuck it. So I had a full on meal.
Gotta go.
And then after like, 15, 30 minutes of like discussion at the table, Dave looks around. He's like, training? And Mike's like, yeah. And I was like, wait, what? And I was doing like high volume legs, high reps. And oh my God, did I throw up in the bathroom for some time. And like the lower GI didn't even like that. And it was like so fucking brutal.
That's brutal. That's horrible.
Yeah, you got to time your shit. But yeah, so TLDR, think about getting some food in you.
Yep.
And if it's something of substance, something solid, that might be independently beneficial. Because if you just drink a Gatorade, that doesn't exactly zap your hunger. It will provide carbohydrates as beneficial from that perspective, but maybe getting like a banana or a fucking sandwich a couple hours before you lift is maybe best practice.
Probably, I would say. And there's plenty of other, you look at like the mental fatigue studies, for example, right? Like we know that psychology plays a role in performance just acutely. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not something that you can really argue with that much.
No, it's not all physiology.
Yeah.
Psychology absolutely matters.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's as simple as grabbing something that helps your psychology feel in a better place, it's that easy.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it, man.
Jake, how old are you?
I'm 31.
Do you remember the Go-Gurt commercials?
Yeah.
Have you ever grabbed a Go-Gurt?
I remember having them when I was younger, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't remember having them. I don't think I've had them as an adult. Maybe I should.
Go-Gurt qualifies as a carbohydrate containing semi-solid, doesn't it?
Yeah. Especially you freeze it just a little bit.
Oh,
I remember doing that.
Huge unlock.
That was nice. Yeah.
Scott, did you ever have Go-Gurt, or were your parents too poor and didn't like you enough to buy you expensive things?
I think my mom put that under the category of like ultra processed food that I wasn't allowed to have, like Fruit Loops and Coke.
That's a sad childhood.
Like cocaine? Mom, I'm at a video game party. Damn, Scott, I didn't know you were raised like that.
Yeah, it was inconsistent. My mom was like, you'd be like, but ice cream's fine, right? Sure.
That's part of growing up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. For the record, I grew up in the Soviet Union where yogurt did not exist unless you made it yourself. Okay.
That's crazy.
That was sad.
It's wild to think about. I've been surviving on Greek yogurt for the last few months. Yeah, it's weird.
Yo, Greek yogurt is like, I know God is real because he made the best nutrition food ever. And particularly God is Greek. This is Zeus.
Of course.
Like, what does Zeus eat? Fucking Greek yogurt. Next question.
That's why he's so jacked.
Oh, bro, Zeus is mega jacked. I actually saw a thumbnail title on YouTube recently of why were the Greeks like so jacked? My first thing, I didn't watch the video, so I'm not talking shit. My first thought was like, is it really true that like they were as jacked as the mythical beings they
all Greek people
sculpted?
Yeah.
Like someone like sees like a Batman comic later in 200 years when society fell, and they're like, everyone was fucking 280 with veins everywhere. And there was this guy named Bane. He was like 500 pounds. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Eat some Go-Gurt. Slam into a Slim Jim, and we're good to go.
There you go. Perfect takeaway.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right. Next topic. You still good to go?
Oh, I'm good, man.
You're vibing?
Yeah.
Scott, when he said he was good, he did this thing where he like pulled at his hair and I was like, oh, that's what jealousy feels like inside.
I turned you on a little bit?
I'm not going to say it didn't.
Okay.
Fuck, man. Do girls talk to you about your hair?
It's more guys, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm being dead serious.
No, I feel you. Listen.
It's how, I mean, it's like muscles, right? Like girls don't care.
No.
It's all just dudes.
No.
Which like cool. I mean, I'll take I'm honored, you know?
Honored.
But yeah.
As well as you should be our anointed king.
Yeah. I also have a very happy relationship, so I don't need any attention from the ladies. So I'm good.
Fuck these ladies. Well, not literally, because that would be bad.
That's true. Not figuratively.
Figuratively. Your girlfriend's like, what were you up to? Like figuratively having sex with women. She's like, what? You're like, I know, sorry. I'll take that back.
Yeah, you wouldn't get it. It's okay.
You wouldn't get it. She's like, well, I can't understand figurative stuff. Does she have longer hair than you or no?
Her hair is past her butt. It is long.
You guys are a hell of a couple.
Yeah, she gets a lot of compliments on it. It's cool.
She gets a compliment. You're like, hello.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, hey, what's up, man?
Hair?
Anyway, turn back to her. You're like, good.
She gets all the, wow, you're so jacked. She gets the, wow, your tattoos are so cool. I get nothing.
But you're also jacked and you also have tattoos and long hair.
That's what I'm saying. I don't get anything. She gets all the love.
Fuck.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
What do I got to do, man?
But because you're all like Nordic metal looking, brutal is great.
That's true.
So every time you're not paid attention to, you like write down more chords. You're like, fuck yeah, this is sick. My life fucking sucks, bro.
Yeah. Just walk around, you know.
Yes. Yes. Excellent. Scott, stay calm. I know you're one of these people. Well, Scott, you're into metal or no, you're more into rock?
All the above.
All the above. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Scott is a musician and a sound engineer by training. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, he's heard all of it before from girls.
Now he's doing podcasts?
Yeah, he's a fucking low level. He's a fucking YouTuber. Call him that. He hates it. YouTube aside, refeeds and diet breaks during a fat loss phase.
Yeah.
Refeeds are opportunities for a meal or several meals or a day or several days to usually eat substantially more calories, mostly coming from carbohydrates. Diet breaks are usually measured in terms of several days to a week or several weeks. And generally you return back to a maintenance calorie diet, normal macro distribution, ostensibly to bring down diet fatigue, which is a term I made up, literally. I'm not sure if it's real. It sure feels real.
It does.
And the industry has been just debating each other incessantly and with feelings hurt about, do diet breaks work? Do refeeds work? Is it just something bodybuilders do? Is it basically just like copium for being too big of a pussy to go through a hardcore fat loss phase?
Definitely that one.
Right. And we're done, guys. See you next time. Peace. Is it, because, you know, like there's a couple stories to tell there. One story is like on technical, physiological grounds, these are beneficial practices. Eat some more carbs, you get more energy, your muscles fill up. There's a beneficial story to tell on psychological grounds of like just getting away from the fucking grind. Because your body's really tuned in to like when it feels like it's starving, it re-alters your mind to do terrible things like only pay attention to food, like treat your training energy down to zero and all that bullshit. So your sleep crushes out. And then there's another story to tell of like, we're just food focused and hungry. So we're like caricaturing these ideas about how beneficial these things are. And they're really not. And if you really just like grind it in, because you don't lose any weight really on a refeed or diet break, just get a shorter diet going and then you're going to be fine. I think last I checked, Menno Henselman's is kind of that latter position. And there are people in that former position, but most of the scientifically minded ones used to be really open-minded about refeeds and diet breaks. As far as I've understood, the recent literature hasn't been ultra kind to any mechanistic benefits, but I'm always kind of looking for some because I'm a fat, stupid fuck that's too willless to diet properly. And so I always want an excuse to be like I'm prepping for a show. My wife comes in and I'm like a third pizza and she's like, baby, I'm like, diet breaks. The scientist said so. So tell me something I want to hear, please.
Well, hopefully I can. I think ultimately there's not okay.
You don't have to tell me shit, by the way.
No, I know. Because I want to know it too. Like I want that same thing too.
Yes.
Especially because it would reflect my experience so well.
Yes.
You know, I think at the end of the day, there's not very much research anyway. At least as far as I'm aware, there's one study on acute performance. Does a refeed day improve your performance in the following day's workout? That was Mora, I believe is how you say the name, that didn't, which was kind of surprising to me. It was a very high volume leg workout. And it was after they'd been dieting for a long time. And, now maybe they just weren't super lean. I think that's sort of an independent, as I'll circle back to. I think that's important. But so we have that. Didn't really see the performance benefit. Also wasn't worse though, so.
God, can you imagine if performance got worse?
Horrible.
There is a way in which that can happen. When you have highly repleted glycogen, you tend to produce more metabolites because your fast glycolysis has less of a cap to it. And then you end up just cramping faster. Like the kind of pumps and cramps you can get with fucking massive carbs. Crazy. And sometimes the pump can stop your performance, especially over multiple sets.
Yeah.
Like you get a sick pump after set 2, and at set 3, like you're just not moving around much anymore. And your body's like, dude, you're an idiot. Stop training. So.
Especially, very quick aside.
Yeah.
When like earlier we talked about adjusting set numbers and stuff, right? And auto-regulating. There's no clear-cut way to do that. There's no, black and white rules. There's no anything. So there's probably a variety of factors we should pay attention to. One of them might be, what's your pump feel like? Have you gotten 0 pumps so far? Maybe you can do more, whatever. But if you're getting this just crazy pump after set 2, that might be one of several indicators you use to stop early when maybe you didn't need to stop early or whatever. Anyway, so we have that study. We have 3 that I'm aware of that kind of look at long-term outcomes. The refeed study from Bill Campbell's lab in 2020, diet break study from Payos et al. 2021, I believe. And then last year there was one from Seidler et al. From Grant Tinsley's lab.
That's awesome. Did Jackson Payos just got his IFBB Pro card?
Good for him. I was not aware of that.
That's
awesome.
Fucking dope.
Man,
like a fucking legit researcher PhD with a fucking pro card. That's dope. That's awesome. Someone's like, you bro. He's like, shut up.
Someday. We'll see if I get there.
Dude, my man. Is that an interest of yours?
100%. IFBB, I'm not so sure. But in general.
Drugs and shit.
Yeah, I don't know if that's for me, but I just competed last month, believe it or not. So
what do you do with your hair when you compete?
Man bun. Get it out of the way. I know. It's
Scott,
sad.
what do you think about that? What do we want? What do the people want? Do the people want a ponytail?
What do you mean, on this podcast?
No, we want like when next time Jake competes, should he let it fly like free? Like, cause you could like fucking do a pose where you could like fucking let it go.
I mean, that's not a bad idea, but like, that's what I think.
We'd have to get Jared on here to figure out the hair. Jared's haircut, the fucking mohawk.
Yeah.
It's like everyone gives a shit for it, but the judges don't give a fuck. Like the judges, to be completely honest, the judges don't give a shit what your hair looks like.
Yeah.
They just don't look at it. And if they're picking like a representative for the whole sport, maybe you need a nice haircut. But then again, half the guys are bald. Never mind.
100%. At least half the guys.
Oh God, yeah.
Wow.
Well, plus the steroids, that doesn't help anybody. So you compete in drug-free bodybuilding. That's fucking dope, dude.
Thanks. Yeah, it's fun. This is my first. I tried to do it back in 2020, and we all know what happened. So I had to stop.
Some of us also had show plans back then.
Yeah, I was 5 weeks out. Everything got canceled. I had to stop.
Damn.
Yeah, so that was fun.
Well, at least you were pretty lean by then.
Yeah, it's cool.
Was it like a happy time where you're like, hey, fuck it, let's go get pizza?
Kind of. I mean, my anxiety was through the roof at the time. So I was like scared of everything, but it all worked out, I suppose.
Yeah, in some way. Yeah. We're still alive.
Yes and no. Yeah. But it was nice to come back here this year and like finish the job. You know what I mean? That felt really good.
Yes. Amazing.
Yeah, that was awesome.
All right. So sorry to sidetrack. Continue. The 3 studies.
So as you mentioned, the physiological things. So the idea, these have been used for a long time in coaching, right? Especially for like bodybuilding prep, but even just general fat loss diets, people will do things like this. And some of it is purely for a more flexibility. Maybe you want to go out to eat on the weekend. Let's give you more calories to play with, whatever, right?
Fewer calories in the week, more on the weekend. You get to eat all your fun foods. You just have to suffer a little bit more of the week. It's worth.
Yeah, 100%. And I think about it sometimes, those days in the week, it already kind of sucks. So if I take 50 calories off, it feels the same, but that one day feels great, so it can feel worth it.
And there's another thing where like during the week, when you're in the lab and you're working with clients, who gives a shit how you feel? That's why they invented caffeine.
Yeah.
Like
that was, not to bring it back to that, but that was one of the reasons I wanted to prep this year is I was so busy. I literally did not have time to think about being hungry.
Yes.
It helps so much.
Huge help.
Crazy.
And then on the weekends when everyone's chilling out, you're like, I sure as shit wish I had more food.
Yeah.
So it works out in a psychological way.
It really does. So that's, that's certainly one argument that's very valid. And, or some of the, like the diet fatigue that you mentioned, right? Like maybe you take a diet break to kind of let that chill out a little bit and you go back. But the other argument is, does this help you perform better in the gym, which theoretically retain more muscle through the diet? Or maybe, acutely higher carbohydrate feeding might ramp up your metabolic rate. Does that help you maintain your RMR a little bit better throughout the diet? We usually see RMR will drop if you lose a substantial amount of weight.
Yes, and that's a very technical, very easily measurable physiological claim.
So they tested those things, right, in some of these studies. And it's just not super optimistic, right? In the Campbell study, there is a tiny bit better maintenance of dry fat-free mass in the refeed group, meaning fat-free mass, everything that's not fat, right?
Yep.
But dry is they remove the water aspect of that. So it's a little bit, it's still not muscle per se only,
right?
But it's closer to that.
Some of your muscle is actually intramuscular fat stores and all that stuff. All the cell membranes are made of fat. So
right.
It's kind of like,
and so there's better maintenance of that a little bit in the refeed group, but like you can make an argument that the timing of that post-test measurement, it was 2 days after the end of the study.
Catching the glycogen.
It might have been glycogen, right? So it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But let's say even if we're super optimistic and say that was a real effect, it's small and it's one study and we just can't, take a ton out of that. The 2 diet break studies, there was really no evidence of physiological things happening.
Pretty much any
muscle.
physiological thing.
But there is some trends for some psychological things in the diet break studies. So like less desire to eat by the end of the study, less desire to give into cravings, less hunger in general.
With the same weight loss?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's big.
It takes longer.
It takes longer.
Yeah, that's the con, right?
So one of my instant, potentially premature takeaways, and I often do premature things. Am I right? Ladies?
I wouldn't know.
No. Earlier today, you don't remember? You don't want to remember.
I don't know.
We had a thing.
I'll savor it, the memory.
My man. I savored something. Scott, what kind of podcast is this? Jesus Christ. Who put me up to this? I blame Scott.
Yeah.
If you, in the physique competition world, a whole different discussion, because at some point you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But maybe, just maybe, in the world of real humans trying to lose weight, if you can extend someone's diet and have them still be consistent on it, but decrease the feelings of, I have to eat the whole earth after the diet ends, they lose the same amount of weight. Those feelings are probably massively causative of a probability to just go ham, pull up to the fucking, what's your cheat meal of choice? What's your fast food? Dirtiest, nastiest post contest. I shouldn't be doing this, but here I am.
You know what's really funny? You want to know what my post show meal was?
Oh, fuck. Here we go.
Subway.
I
wanted vegetables and chicken so bad.
Yes. That's how you know you're really starving to death.
I was eating pretzels and cereal all day, I was like, give me real food.
Yeah, you're right. Because you were carbing. Yes. Real salty food.
Oh, it was amazing.
So people typically fall off the fucking wagon after dieting. And I literally mean people typically do, like 80% or some shit like that.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And so maybe with some refeeds programmed into regular human diets, we can marginally reduce the feelings of, oh God, I need to eat after this, and maybe get some more people to continue to, because weight loss and dieting is actually something that almost everyone, I walked that back. That was stupid. The GPT misfired.
There's your soundbite though.
Oops.
Too late.
Too late. That's it. Reels and fucking, that's it. A lot of people can diet and lose weight. Some small fraction of them can keep it off.
Yeah.
And so if we can pull back on the hunger and the cravings at the end through refeeds, maybe there's something there. Sure. Very maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I will say though, sometimes it works in the other direction where sometimes you just want to maintain that momentum as you go.
Yes.
Right. And like I always think about, Here's let me embarrass myself with an analogy in front of Dr. Mike.
I usually embarrass myself and everyone around. So please take some of the fucking pressure off me.
There we go. So I always think about like, you're going through this diet, right? And it's kind of like you're walking through this dark tunnel or a cave or something. And
very metal, by the way.
Yeah, see? And somebody runs by, they have like a flashlight or a torch or something. And they just, they run by. And that's like the refeed, is it lights up everything for a second. You're like, oh, sweet, I can see.
Yes.
They run away. Everything feels even darker now. Even like darker. You're reminded how horrible this was. And now, I am scared. And, so for some people, that's what refeeds feel like. It's like it's a trigger to binge eat. It's a reminder of how restricted they are usually. Yeah, all these.
I've been through all that shit, man.
It's hard. Yeah. So it's got to be you got to listen to the person, right? And see what's up.
One does not simply assume that this magical thing that's going to be great for everyone. And it could be worse for more people than not.
Yeah.
A much shittier analogy. That was an excellent analogy, by the way. I'm stealing that. And because I'm the analogy king, I made it up. I don't give a shit if this video's out. I still made it up.
Okay. Fair.
Fucking weirdo. So
I get royalties, right?
Of course.
Okay.
Well, rocker haircut, you get royalties anyway. Your haircut is so cool and rocker-like that you actually just get royalties from like bands you've never heard of. You're like, what the fuck? iTunes just pays you.
That'd be great.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah, I don't need a coach anymore. I can just do that.
100%, man. So I used to say this analogy of like, it's apparently, in my dilettante way of knowing things I don't really know, apparently it's a known thing that the way they break you in spy interrogation or whatever, interrogation by Central Intelligence Agencies, isn't just they just beat you and torture you, because people, especially that have been trained in tradecraft to resist, they just tunnel into like, I'm dying with this shit. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And so the more you beat them, the more they throw up the middle finger and you're like, they're just going to die. So what they do instead is they beat you for a while and they play loud music and all these uncomfortable things. Then they come in and they're really nice to you. They give you a comfortable place to sit. They give you some food. They give you hydration. They talk to you real nice.
Yeah.
And then even they might try being like, do you want to tell us anything that we want to know? Because like, you're just going back into the bullshit after this, but you don't have to. And you go, fuck you. You tip over the table. They fucking beat you again. And then they come back in again and nice to you. And you realize that the niceness feels so good.
Yeah.
And if you could just be in your dark tunnel, you die happy and resistant. But they break you by getting you to be essentially addicted to like, I need the light. I need the food. I need this because I know what it's like now. And in a diet, you get a similar thing. You've probably noticed this. When you're deep into a diet, you get kind of elevated sympathetic overdrive where you're like a little bit fight or flight all the time. But that gives you a fucking eye laser energy. And you're not even hungry anymore because your cortisol's so high. Like you're just like, I'm not hungry. Like if a T-Rex is chasing you, you're not hungry. And as soon as you eat a ton of carbs, especially for a meal or two, you relax. And your body's like, oh shit, I'm not in sympathetic overdrive anymore. And it's like, by the way, you're hungrier than you've ever been before. And hey, that food we just ate, wasn't it amazing? Right. Don't you want more of that? And then it fucks up the whole game plan.
That's my coach, Ryan Doris, always says this too. He's like, nothing works for productivity like hunger, like true hunger, right? It's like the caveman brain goes back to there's a mammoth or whatever they ate, or whatever, like that is the only thing. Tunnel vision. You're doing it, right?
There's no way to tunnel vision better than fucking that shit. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So we're not going to jump to conclusions and say everyone needs refeeds. Jake, what can we get out of the literature that's like, other than, so one thing we can get out tentatively is if you think there's going to be a big, huge mega advantage of refeeds across populations, you're probably wrong. And that's an insight in and of itself because it's weird to me. Do you know what the file drawer effect is in science?
Yeah.
Like people ostensibly don't publish some findings because they're not impressive and they just file them away. I think that effect is probably wildly overrated. And here's why. One is like you got funding to do the study and you get your promotion and tenure off of pubs. Nobody gives a fuck what the pubs say, not the tenure promotion people anyway. So you're going to publish all kinds of dog shit. There's null findings. And the other thing is null findings are absolutely valid findings. And a lot of scientists know that. So even if we can conclude that, refeeds probably aren't amazing, that's already something interesting because when you're hungry as hell, 17 weeks into your diet, you start Googling refeeds and convincing yourself that you need them. You start talking to ChatGPT. You're like, refeed? It's like, nah, fam, you're good. And
Yep.
you're like, ooh. You go to Claude. Claude's like, yeah, do it. You're like, thank God. So it's good to know that maybe it's not ultra powerful, or are there too few studies to even conclude that?
I mean, I think if it was ultra powerful, we'd probably see something already, at least the start of a trend or something general. But I think it also, it's not clearly better, but it's also not clearly worse. So to me, it's like there's options.
Yes.
And it gets back to what you said about null findings, and so important is if things are similarly effective, you could look at that and say like, wow, okay, that's boring.
We don't know anything.
I don't need to do this or
Right.
whatever. We don't know anything. You could also look at it and say like, wow, we have all these options at our disposal.
Yes.
And there's, if you're a personal trainer, if you're a whatever, and you work with all sorts of different people, you have all these things you can use to tailor your approach, which is, it's huge. It's so important, right? And then I think the other thing that I would say is we have not yet, and we will never, unfortunately, have study in the population that I think it would have potential physiological benefits. Now would be very lean people who've been dieting for a long time.
Yes.
Contest prep bodybuilders,
Yes.
right? Which
they don't typically let you futz with their stuff.
Yeah, they're not, we're not going to find enough people to have a powered study to actually detect something.
I hope that AI boosts our overall social productivity and wealth by like an order of magnitude in the next 10 years so that we can comfortably afford to pay people beyond a living wage to simply exist
That'd be
and
awesome.
bodybuild and to get lean. And there's not even a show at the end. You just paid like $5,000 a week, and then your food is made for you by a robot, and it's either high carb, low carb, refeed not, and we just find out everything. It'd be fucking amazing.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
I'd sign up for that study.
Yeah,
Like, just
dude.
paid to live in a training center and just fucking exist.
Yeah,
You get kicked out because you're sneaking Cheetos.
Yeah,
You ruin your opportunity.
The show was like, that's not even the best part for me. The process is what it's all about, right?
Yes.
So like, I'd sign up in a minute.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I think if we ever were able to get some kind of data on that, that'd be awesome. Because I hazard to guess those are the people where keeping your glycogen stores full is more of a concern.
Yeah.
Where potentially those very, very small, maybe not even statistically meaningfully measurable, whatever, on a study level, but those very small improvements over time within the individual maybe does manifest into greater muscle mass retention or what have you. So we're never going to get that study. I've come to terms with that.
Justin Bieber made this very clear. Never say never.
Okay.
Violating his own edict, by the way, twice.
That's true. That's true.
I always like to point that out. It takes most folks a few seconds to be like, oh, fuck, you're
That's
right.
funny.
That
Yeah.
son of a bitch.
That's funny.
No, we're not, Scott, we're not calling Justin Bieber a son of a bitch, are we?
No.
Okay, real quick. Scott, do you think like man against man in a fucking Coliseum, no weapons, you versus Biebs, who's walking out?
Oh, please.
Biebs, right? Oh, please. He's a star-studded musician. He's had to beat off groupies since he was like 10.
Yeah.
Wouldn't beat me off in that policy.
There you go.
Anyway.
I never said we were fighting. I just said who's walking away and who's got the weak knees. Jake, do you think you could take Justin Bieber in a fight?
I don't know. I'm not very violent.
That's for the best.
I'm a teddy bear.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Next topic.
On that note.
Scott, we better keep as much of this shit. Well, you already know the drill. We keep all this bullshit in. People love the fucking shit. They either love it or they hate it. Either way, they're commenting.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
All right. So concurrent training.
Yeah.
Typically understood as mixing some form of lifting and some form of cardio or endurance training. Sometimes it's hypertrophy and endurance. Sometimes it's strength and endurance. Sometimes it's power and endurance.
Yeah.
And the big question for a lot of people who are trying to get jacked is how much of an impact does concurrent training have on hypertrophy? Because cardio is like a thing people do for bodybuilding to get in shape, but also we had Eric Trexler here a while back, and it's like pretty definitive that like as long as you get enough daily steps and keep your energy output like moderate, actually forcing cardio down your throat might be a net negative at that point. So cardio is a little bit out of favor. A lot of the bodybuilders of like 80s and 90s used to post, good God, they didn't have social media. These would be pictures of them. And, guys in the early 2000s, mid 2000s would post pictures and videos of like them on the treadmill suffering.
Yep.
Nowadays, you see that that's actually less common. Most of the guys are like, John Jewett's wearing a step tracker and all that other stuff.
Yep.
So, but that's still like, cardio still can fucking put in some calorie burning. And also not everyone is trying to be a stage bodybuilder, but like you want to have legs, for example, that like a respectable human male would have, but you also like want to do like some marathons and jog or something. And you are like, okay, I just want to understand the scope of the problem. Like how much hypertrophy am I giving up when I do XYZ amount of cardio? Because just to paint the perspective for everyone listening and just get on the same page, the perspective ranges realistically for good faith attempts at reasoning from people that are sort of evidence-based at least, all the way on the one side from people saying, look, like you got to really just run your legs off your body and it's just not going to matter much in most cases. So lift to your heart's content, do as much cardio as you like, you're going to be fine. All the way to the other end of people are like, dude, like if you, especially as a strength athlete, but even as a bodybuilder, if you want your biggest, fullest legs on stage, minimize cardio to the maximum extent that you can so you can pour a crap load of training into your legs and not have any lost size. What do you think about this entire problem space? What research analysis can you bring to bear?
I think I find myself kind of somewhere in the middle, which is the most unhelpful, most evidence-based person answer ever. It depends.
It depends.
But so there's been a couple of recent meta-analyses on this. This is like meta-analysis, the episode. That's really funny.
I love it, man.
The most recent one I think is helpful thinking about strength, but for hypertrophy, it's a little bit less so, just because with their inclusion criteria, they just didn't include a ton of data for the hypertrophy stuff. But luckily, there's another one that we can hit on. But
excellent. For
strength, at least, it seems like the effect sizes that they found from their analysis favor lifting only for lower body strength, but doesn't seem to really matter for upper body strength, which makes some sense, right? If you're doing a bunch of cardio, your legs are really fatigued, you go do a squat 1RM, might not go super well.
Shit sucks.
Right? Not super fun. On the hypertrophy side, they found that it didn't really matter, which you could certainly look at and be like, yeah, that kind of suits my experience or whatever. But there's more nuance there, which is why I like the meta from Monserratavallaro, I believe is the name.
That's a lot of name.
Pronounce that correctly. We'll see. I'm sure I butchered every name in here, but
we're American.
That's true.
We don't have to pronounce people's names properly because we have a dominant nuclear arsenal.
That's true.
You want to talk some shit about pronunciations? Oh shit, what's that? Is that a Trident missile? Woo! Sure looks like an eagle to me.
It does.
Anyway,
their analysis had, I think it was like 25 studies for the hypertrophy outcomes. So there's just so much more power in there to detect things. And they, looking at everything, found that it tended to favor lifting only for hypertrophy, right? Meaning concurrent training, you're decreasing your outcomes a little bit.
Yes.
Wasn't crazy.
Okay. But so let's be very clear on something.
Yeah.
Decreasing outcomes means that if you lift and do cardio and you're anything other than ultra super advanced, pushing the very edge of space on your frame for muscle, means you still get more jacked.
Yes.
Even if you do plenty of cardio, but a little less more jacked than you would have gotten had you just not done much cardio.
You're making some sort of trade-off, but it's not ruining everything.
You're not losing muscle.
Right.
Because there's a big difference between gaining a little less muscle and like losing muscle. Because some bros, including myself, are like, dude, if I fucking do one extra step, I'm losing my quads.
Yeah.
And that's just not in the conversation.
It just isn't. I say that a lot. I feel like on these random Instagram posts shouting into the void, whatever that we do.
What do you think we're doing now?
Exactly.
There's nobody here, man. It's just 3 cameras. And Scott. Sorry, Scott.
That's true.
Scott's
he's a human being. Okay?
I wouldn't push too hard on that one.
That like just because something's suboptimal doesn't mean it's nothing, right? Like suboptimal could mean 98% of the outcome.
Yes.
And you'll never notice the difference.
Yes. Most of us live our lives suboptimally in every conceivable respect.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you're still going to grow just a little bit less, but when they went in and did what's called a sub-analysis, they split it up into different intensities of cardio.
Ooh,
this is where it gets more interesting, right? That when high intensity interval training is included, we see pretty strong negatives from that. When it's just moderate or low intensity, no difference, right? It's fine. The cardio is not hampering the outcomes at all, at least to a statistically significant degree.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I postulate a potential mechanism for that? And you tell me if I'm just dumb and out of touch as usual.
Sure, probably.
My wife tells me that all the time.
Okay.
Mostly she doesn't talk to me. when you do low intensity cardio, like incline walking, you are burning most of the calories and the glycogen, et cetera, from your smaller, slower twitch muscle fibers, the ones least responsible for growing, period. You're kind of using your slower twitch muscle fibers, which are a small fraction of the total volume of your legs anyway, to power all that work. And thus you conserve the glycogen and the recovery abilities of your faster twitch fibers. And then they go to the lifting thing, they go to the recovery thing, and they're largely unaffected. But if you start doing high intensity interval training, I mean, you're using fast twitch muscle fibers like crazy to push and pull. And then they're like fucking tired and depleted of glycogen and the margins and a little more muscle damage. And then you pay the cost for that in lifting. Is that maybe part of what's going on?
I would think so, for sure.
From experience, it sure shit seems like, that's kind of how it feels.
Do you remember in what was that? Maybe like the late 2000s, early 2010s, where it's like everybody's doing HIIT.
Everyone was doing HIIT.
And then we slowly found out, like, you know what, if I just do incline walking or something, I don't feel super beat up all the time. This is kind of nice. It's crazy.
Some of us who like played sports before we lifted, when it came out, they're like, do HIIT, it's evidence-based. We were like, are you guys dumb or some shit like that? Like, have you ever done wrestling practice and then tried to lift? Like, are you fucking crazy?
Yeah, it's wild.
And I remember there was a few folks in the evidence-based space, almost all of whom who have since walked this back. And folks like evidence-based space adjacent, who would just parrot various things their favorite influencer said, took a pretty hard line on the fact that like HIIT cardio was everything and you're an idiot if you did slow walking. And Jared Feather, predictably, Scott Anakin, the first drawing of the red lightsaber, he was like, you guys are completely fucking backwards wrong on this. And we had no data at the time. We had like 1 or 2 studies where like in completely untrained people, HIIT group actually grew more muscle because like that was a stimulus for them, right? As it's just more work. And Jared ended up winning that one in a fucking gigantic winning. You know, nobody wins. He just happened to have guessed correctly, but he was guessing based on like inference from physiology and also like massive amounts of personal client experience. So we're like, have you guys ever actually tried this? Like HIIT workouts are fucking brutal. And for general fitness, they're amazing because they're brutal. But if you have to balance like high volume training programming, you ain't doing that shit. Yeah,
it's tough. That's one of the things, like real talk, that's one of the things I respect you guys the most for is that when there's no need to respect
when
there's not the scientific data, like we acknowledge that, and then let's look at the logic.
We still have to make decisions.
You still got to do something, man. We can't. It's so unhelpful to just be like, well, there's no data. What do I do?
You know? You're on a date with a girl. She's like, do you like the date? You're like, well, it's insufficient data to conclude.
I'm not sure yet.
Jesus Christ.
She's going to leave, right?
Maybe. Or she's like, ooh, I have to prove you wrong. Or she'll look at your hair and she's like, so what's your hair care routine? That's what I would ask. Scott, I'm straight, right? 100%. Thank you, Scott.
It's not what it seemed like earlier.
I mean, we all put on a different hat, if you know what I mean.
Okay, I do.
So in any case, so they found that more high intensity cardio meaningfully interfered with hypertrophy, more so than lower intensity cardio.
Yeah. No significant difference between lifting only or concurrent for the low intensity stuff.
That's so good. That's such good news.
It is good news.
And so that means like if you get an elliptical and just jam out a little bit, if you do some swimming, if you do some walking or incline walking, as long as your legs don't feel like noodles, you're probably good to go.
Yeah, 100%. That's always my thought process is if you just think like prioritize performance. That solves so much stuff. Right? If you're so fatigued that your performance is going down, change it. Right? Like it's move the session away from your leg day or whatever, right? It could be that simple. Because like you said, like so many people, just normal people doing fat loss stuff, maybe they want to diet and be able to eat a little bit more. So they do some cardio to get the calorie burn, right? Cool. That's fine. So it's an easy change like that. Or maybe you're doing a contest prep and you sort of, maybe you're like me and your metabolism just isn't super fast. So rather than eating 1,200 calories, you decide to do some cardio. It's fine, right? You can have that peace of mind. You're not going to lose all your muscle as long as, you do it intentionally. And even if you did do a bunch of HIIT, like you're not going to fall apart. You're going to be okay. It's just maybe not the best thing that you could do.
Right. So just make your trade-offs in a known space where you understand, like understanding what the space looks like and moving on the margins up or down in one variable or another is like, that's just decision-making. And there's nothing wrong with making one decision or another, as long as you know like what's coming your way.
Just got to be informed. And maybe, I've had clients in the situation where, we don't want to decrease food more because then we're going to risk adherence. not good.
Or insanity.
Yeah. We need to do some cardio, whatever. They have such tight time constraints that taking an hour walk every day is just not realistic.
Nope.
Okay, we got to up the intensity because we just, so based on the situation, maybe you make that trade-off, but then it's like, okay, well, we need to do high intensity stuff for those reasons. Let me make sure that it's as far away from a leg day as possible. Yep. Just things like that to mitigate as much of the downside as you possibly can. And in my experience, it's gone super well, right? It's another one of those. It's so much of this too is like, just don't overthink it, and you're going to be fine.
Sure,
you know what I mean? Like the science is so cool, but at the end of the day, it really can be pretty simple.
Science usually has some very straightforward and nuanced conclusions that don't introduce a lot of complexity. They actually resolve complexity. They reduce it. And so a lot of times when people are like, oh, science, that means like calculations and numbers and shit and complexity. And you're like, actually science can distill things down into principles and concepts that you can be like, don't train when you're really hungry. Don't do so much cardio that your legs feel super tired and then go lift. And people are like, well, didn't we already know that? Like, no, we had assumed that, but now that we have science, now we much more accurately know it. And then we can take it to the bank. And one of the biggest things science can give you is even if it changes your practices, not at all, because you were some kind of prescient God and you just knew science in advance, it can at least give you an unreal amount of peace of mind.
Yes.
Of like, I'm
just
doing
huge,
especially during prep.
Yeah.
It's the last thing you fucking have.
Yeah.
You start questioning, what the fuck am I doing this at all?
Yeah. If you're self-coached, even more so, like the paralysis by analysis is crazy, right?
Yeah.
So if you can chill that out.
It's a big deal. I used to like do cardio walks at various points in various preps, and I'd walk by like a restaurant and there's like a family and they're eating and they're so fucking happy, Jake. And I'm like, why can't I be happy?
I know. Yeah.
No, science is dope, man. Science is dope. So, is this a field, a space with a concurrent literature where you feel pretty confident that, this is kind of how it is? Or is there such a situation here where it's like diet breaks and refeeds where like we need triple the research to really get confident?
I mean,
obviously more is better.
More is always helpful, but I feel pretty confident, to be honest, especially when you start to combine it with the practical experience, your general evidence-based triangle, right?
Yes.
Especially when I look at all of that stuff together, I'm just like, low to moderate intensity stuff, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
What are your favorite modalities for that?
Elliptical, 100%. I lived on the elliptical for prep. Yeah.
Isn't it great?
It's gorgeous.
If I saw you in the gym on the elliptical from like behind, I would 100% assume you're a woman and I would begin the lay down game.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because you got a fat ass too. I don't mean to sound weird. And by fat, I mean just bulbous and muscly.
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Scott, come on, Jake from behind on an elliptical. You know what I'm saying? You'd be like, yo. You are the straightest man alive. By a long shot.
I really hope you didn't flirt with your other guests this much because I would feel a little bit disappointed. I feel special right now.
Greedy fuck. You think we're in a relationship now?
I mean, I feel kind of attached. I don't know.
Scott, he's like the guy that wants to know the hooker's real name and shit like that. The hell is wrong? That's not how this business works.
I want a relationship, okay? It's not just, okay. It's not surface level.
You get done with a hooker and like you're sitting up in bed and you're like, what are we? She's like, what? I'm just kidding. Here's $1. What do I got here?
$1. Perfect. Budget hooker. Okay.
It's a lesson for her not to trust pieces of shit like you.
Yeah, that's fair. You're helping her at the end of the day, right?
In some sense, yeah. It's a nasty business, and I'm going to show you why. So basically, so elliptical is great. Another benefit of the elliptical is that it really distributes the load.
Yeah.
So you're not, legs aren't burned out, your arms aren't burned out, everything feels kind of chill. And another one is the zero impact. Yeah. So like you don't want to crack down on your fucking knees and ankles if you're in prep and you're like, I have enough to worry about.
Oh man. Yeah. And you're not bouncing around as much as you might on a treadmill sometimes or on some of these, a rower, like you're moving so much. So like me, put your phone up there. I put my Kindle up there a lot. I would read a book or whatever. Anything to like get your mind off the mindless cardio. So nice.
Dude, the worst thing about the machines is they front and center put like how many calories you're burning, how much time it is.
Yeah.
And the clock is like,
so slow. You got to cover it with your phone.
It might as well just like come up with a display that says this will never end. You're going to die.
Just an infinity
here.
symbol.
Infinity symbol. No one's coming to save you. You're like, I think the scroll bar's working wrong. Like, nope, that's what's supposed to be in there. Oh, damn it.
Are you a watch TV while you do cardio guy?
It depends on how miserable I'm feeling.
Okay, fair.
There's a graded scale. Not so miserable, intellectual podcasts, because it can still make sense of shit.
Sure.
More miserable, fun YouTube, TV shows, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Something to get at me.
Yeah.
Most miserable, music.
Okay.
Oh,
cool.
Somewhere tied with podcasts, or even all the way up to like the TV shows level of misery, probably my biggest one is phone calls with friends and family.
Nice.
Because
that's
like,
great.
Bro, you can talk to someone for 45 minutes and it's like, it feels like 5. And then you're like, oh my fucking God, I burned 600 calories.
Yeah, that's really
Whereas
good.
Like, even some TV shows, you start checking how much is left on the YouTube scroll bar and you're like, oh my God.
And like I'm sure you relate, like you're doing a prep, a lot of those other things can kind of fall by the wayside a little bit. Some of those relationships and stuff.
Yes.
You don't talk to friends as much, whatever.
Because you don't have the energy to speak to people.
So even more reason to do that.
They're like, what's up with you? You're like, nothing. I have nothing at all.
I'm just trying to make it until 6 so I can eat again. Or
okay. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah.
So elliptical. Have you ever heard of the cold water effect in swimming?
No.
It's like apparently when you get immersed in cold water and you come out afterwards, the hunger response is like super compensatory.
Okay.
Do you know anyone that swims for cardio, or is this like nobody fucking swims because we're all from the Midwest and we just do that? Head first in an ice lake and you die.
Yeah, no. Everybody talks about how amazing swimming is for cardio. I don't know a single person who's done it.
Scott?
No way. Cold water sucks.
Cold water sucks.
This is a hot tub.
Swim in a hot tub.
You're doing donkey paddles circularly in a hot tub. Girl sitting there, she's like, "What are you doing?" You're like, "I'm a contest bodybuilder." She's like, "Okay, can you get out, please?" Anyway, all right, that was awesome. We learned stuff. Last topic.
Okay.
Case study.
Yeah,
you have one.
I do have one.
You can't wait to talk about it.
I can't.
So good news. You don't have to anymore. Tell us a story.
Okay. Quick background is there have been other case studies, obviously, right? Or I guess not so obvious if you're not aware. There you go. Now you're aware.
This is not the first study of its kind.
Yes. Case studies are awesome.
What are case studies?
Case study is usually one participant, but not always. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 or whatever, but small, to where the sample is so small, but you're sort of compensating for that by taking a ton of measurements. So you can usually get more detailed and just report a bunch of stuff, which is great. Having all that data is amazing. And it's insights that you probably wouldn't be able to get with a big sample of people because it's just so unwieldy to deal with. Obviously very limited because it's just one person.
Yes.
So,
and does a case study mean that you're not manipulating any variables? You're just watching? Is it an observational, or can it be pseudo experimental or experimental?
Yeah, I mean, it can. You can have a variety of different kind of strategies there. A lot of times it's just sort of reporting observational stuff, especially for bodybuilding ones, because like they don't really want you to control what they're doing.
But they have no problem with letting you in on all what they're doing.
Sure.
So that's a perfect example for where a case study is just amazing.
Yeah. There's been a handful of them over the years. There was a systematic review last year where they kind of looked at the scope of what's going on. And a systematic review is not a meta-analysis, different, right, for the listeners, to where they're not pooling the data together and reanalyzing it and all that stuff. They're just sort of qualitatively saying, this is the general story that we have.
But that's still better. I don't mean to talk shit, but one of my least favorite things in this world is a narrative review, which is like you're just telling a story on a self-selected sample of bullshit data to weave your crap. Like it's got its upsides, I guess, but it's strange to think of what the fuck they are. Like if it's not a comprehensive review of the literature, get out of my face.
Yeah,
anytime I see like narrative review, because you do your PubMed bullshit and you're trying to find some data and you're like stumble on an awesome fucking title and it's like a narrative review. I'm like, why?
That's tough. It's tough. But they looked at what was available at the time, and there was a couple that they didn't include because they didn't report things that were in the inclusion criteria for the systematic review. But they included, I think it was 11 studies, like 15 total people.
What a trip.
So yeah, it's like but
each one lenses in like super hard on
for
like
sure,
all the details.
It can be such an insight, But so it's awesome that there's that many, but it's also like 15 people is all we got. You think about what's necessary for one group in a study.
That's
to
like
get
15
enough,
people. Yeah.
And even that, if you're looking at something that's difficult to measure or whatever, like you might need double that in each group or whatever.
Yes.
It's crazy. So it's still at the end of the day isn't a ton, but it is still super, super helpful. And, this review just kind of outlined some of the general things that we're seeing. And a lot of it lines up with what would be, in my opinion, pretty appropriate things based on the evidence that we have in terms of, the contest preps were like 3 to 7 months long. The training programs were pretty much in line with sort of evidence-based guidelines, things like that, right? Nothing exciting. But there is a couple really interesting things, I think, that we can take away. One being they reported the calorie intake change from the beginning to the end of people's contest preps, right? Because usually they're reporting their macronutrient intakes daily or if not most days.
I have to ask, drug-free bodybuilders or a combination?
I believe it was drug-free, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I might be slightly off.
That's when people ask if I do drugs. I'm like, that's exactly what I say.
There you go. I believe it was drug-free. But so we're looking at like the change in calorie intake from start to end of the prep, which big caveat, right? If somebody's dreamer bulking before they start their prep, that might throw things off a little bit.
For sure.
But to me, the takeaway isn't the numbers themselves. It's just the range that we're seeing. And it's crazy. Like some people on the low end were changing their calorie intakes by like 100, 200 from start to end of a prep. Crazy. It's nothing, right?
Fuck those genetically gifted
Exactly,
assholes.
right? Other people, like there was a male who changed it by 2,000. Which to
I've
me
been in that boat before.
Have you? That's brutal.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's just that range is insane. Which the message to me is like, there's just so much variability person to person. So people reading that paper, right? If you're a coach, if you're whatever, like just know that you might have coached this person this way. Somebody else might need something different, right? You got to really pay attention.
Yes. A great example would be like you had coached a few people and you cut their calories only by 300 and they just all got in shape. And then you have someone that's like 12 weeks out at this point, maybe 8 weeks out, and you did that same. They just kind of look similar. They have been losing weight and you're like, what the fuck's going on? And like, but you got to cut them more. Some people just their metabolisms adapt faster, more completely for whatever reason. And you just at some point, like as a bodybuilding coach, like, I don't know what it is, but I got to fix it. Yeah. And then to just go onto the calorie bank, a pretty dependable way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's so much more, like I said, dependable with the measurement. Cardio can be weird. You don't know exactly how many calories it was. Or your body's getting more efficient over time.
Yes.
All kinds of stuff.
100%.
So that's tricky. So yeah, getting into the calorie intake is a little more easy to measure.
Brutal, but it works.
Not fun, but so yeah, to me, like I thought that was a really cool takeaway from them looking at the broad picture. We're seeing not everybody, but for the most part, loss of lean body mass, which doesn't necessarily mean muscle, right?
How much though?
It's not a crazy amount, if I'm remembering correctly. Like,
you're talking about 5 to 10 pounds, or are we talking about under 5 pounds?
Certainly not under 5 pounds. I don't remember the exact figure, but I remember thinking it was somewhere in the 5, 10, 15 pounds, something like that.
Oh, that hurts my soul.
It does, but remember, it's also water and glycogen and all those things.
Also, I'm not drug free, so I just pump up the dose like that.
Fair. But yeah, we have that, and it was mostly driven by the males who got the leanest, which makes sense.
Interesting.
The leaner, which again, this is just one of those things. The science is starting to report what we see in practice a lot. The leaner you get, the more at risk you seem to be for losing lean body mass.
Especially at the exotic levels of lean.
Yeah, for sure.
Like a lot of people can get to 8% and do just fine and lose almost nothing.
Right.
And then you start getting to 7, 6, 5, 4. And like the closer you get to 3, wacky shit starts to happen.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Also, you can feel it in your prep. Like I've gotten my settling point down to where like if I get down to 7%, DEXA confirmed, I can still feel fine. And then like inch towards 5%. When I pass through 6, my body's like, you're going to die.
Yeah, that's
You don't have energy anymore.
Yeah.
Just think about food 100% of the time that you're awake. Good news, you're going to be awake 100% of the time because you can't sleep anymore.
That's so funny. Small side note, I didn't have the weird sleep disruptions that most people have.
That's a perfect example of either genetics or environment. I don't want to say luck, but it's fortunate.
Yeah.
Because sleep is like probably like half of the reason injectable growth hormone as a performance enhancer is because it maximizes your sleep quality and duration.
Okay. Interesting.
Like it's night and day.
Interesting.
In a literal sense. And I think a lot of people are like, yeah, man, growth, et cetera. And it's like, yeah, man, you remember what your sleep was like? And they're like, yeah, it's insane. It's like I was a child again. Wow. And like, if you can do that drug free, because, you know, there's people that can get massive and shredded, but their sleep falls apart so much in contest prep that like 4 weeks out, they look pretty good, just a little bit more fat. And then on stage, they're shriveled up and you're like, what the fuck happened to you, bro? You look sick. As soon as, one of my little bullshit rules that I use as like a heuristic for coaching is, as soon as your sleep is dependably degraded substantially, you need a refeed to fix it. Something has to fix it.
Seems very reasonable. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Unless you're like a week out and then fucking just suck it up or some shit like that. But like, you got a refeed coming anyway for the carb up. But it's one of those things like, if you want, because people will do this thing with sleep where they're like, oh, I don't get much sleep in prep or during the diet, but YOLO. And you're like, no.
Yeah.
Sleep is it.
Yeah.
And if your sleep starts to suffer, you're in a bad way.
Yeah. Not good.
Anyway.
It's the worst possible timing for sleep to be bad.
Because, you know, sleep's like critical to every part of recovery.
Yeah.
You've seen the literature, like Menno likes to trot this literature out, which is like direct studies on sleep deprivation and muscle and fat gain. And it's the worst thing you could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
Like you gain a bunch of weight and it's pure fat. And then you lose weight and it's pure muscle.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh
horrible.
my God. So yeah, sleep's a big deal. You're I don't want to say lucky, but you're super fortunate.
I feel lucky.
Sleep.
Yeah, it was great. Anyway, so yeah, like we lost the lean body mass. We see, you know, your other things that you might expect, right? Like decreased testosterone, increased cortisol, things like that. You see some negative trends, disruptions to like eating behavior questionnaires, other psychological things. But it's more variable than you might think. Some people don't have huge negative changes. Some people are horrible. You know, I'm sure most of us, if you've been in the bodybuilding world at all, you know at least one person who developed an eating disorder from their prep and things like that.
Yeah,
So,
that's a thing.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, scientifically minded. I have all the time in the world to believe developed is the right term, but I also have some suspicion as like conditionally revealed. You know, like you would have not had it had you not put yourself through this, but you were always genetically predisposed, and now you got the situation where you're like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
But I've absolutely, I mean, numerous bodybuilder friends of mine, colleagues, associates, myself included, have absolutely developed disordered eating.
Yeah.
A little different from an eating disorder.
Sure.
It's a marginal difference, but it's some substantive difference there. But it absolutely is a thing because like, man, like that's just your body's response of like your body evolutionarily doesn't think that's a disorder. It thinks it's order.
Yeah. Right.
Like it's reestablishing your body fat stores.
So we have that stuff. There's a couple more recent case studies that were not included in that review just because they weren't published yet. Right.
Yep.
Where one of them that actually looked specifically at muscle thickness changes, which is nice.
Okay.
Netum. However you pronounce that. I don't know.
I've know that name and I just,
do you?
I know the name because I've seen it before.
Okay.
And I don't know how to say it.
Okay.
And is that Swedish, Norwegian, or some shit? Yeah. I'm actually collaborating with those five folks on a survey study.
That's awesome.
And that nice gentleman emails me, and I don't know how to say that name.
Yeah.
But you know, our guess is as good as many Americans, I suppose.
Well, sorry, but
hey, Madam. Woo!
But it was a cool case study. But it was cool to see the muscle thickness stuff, right? I think they had 3 participants in that one.
How did that play out?
Not how we would like.
Got it.
General decrease. I think they did vastus lateralis and biceps, and they both decreased.
Fuck.
Which there's glycogen and water in your muscles,
of course.
so maybe we can cope and say that. But
yes, pass the copium, sir.
Yeah, not ideal. We see there was another. What was the other?
Real quick.
Yeah.
Just because we're trying to be all balanced this shit. On the one hand, it's shit news. On the other hand, because we have case studies to demonstrate that all these competitively successful bodybuilders that are very evidence-based or relatively so in many cases are losing pretty substantial amounts of lean body mass or fat-free mass or muscle, however you want to catalog it. Certainly some of it is muscle.
Sure.
It also can let us, those who are prepping, and are seeing our strength decline a little bit towards the end of prep and seeing the fullness go a little bit,
Mhm.
we can understand that like, oh, that's okay is par for the course.
True.
Because like, if you think everyone around you is like gaining muscle into a show,
Mhm.
but you're losing it, you can feel like, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. This is terrible.
Yeah.
And like knowing you're on like the wrong path, especially in something as difficult as prep, it also fucks with your mind because you're like, I need some refeed meals to make sure I don't lose muscle.
Yeah.
And your stomach's like, yes, go.
You
This is what I
sabotage
want you to
it.
conclude. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so it's nice to see in some sense, like, yeah, like you'll lose a little bit of muscle during prep and that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Because everyone gains it back really fast. It's mostly just fullness anyway.
Yeah.
But it's okay if you're not like the strongest you've ever been. And most of the elite champion bodybuilders know that.
Yeah.
Like if you tell an off-season IFB pro, like, so you're about this strong at the end of prep, they're like, the fuck is wrong with you?
Right.
And like, you generally a bit stronger at the end of prep than normal, but that's just entirely a steroid effect. Like when you take tren only at the end of prep, it does its magical tren things
Makes
and then
sense.
you're psychotic and
There you
really
go.
strong.
Maybe I should do that, man. That sounds nice.
Don't even bother with the fucking normal shit. Right into tren,
Yes.
first day,
Perfect.
the whole vial.
Okay, cool.
If you're a real man,
Okay. I want to be a real man.
I don't know how to follow that up. I had nothing to say at the end of that. You're going to go insane like everyone else.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
What's the price?
yeah, right.
Some sweet metal lyrics come out of that.
That's
though.
true. That's true. Okay. So we had
Muscle thickness measurement.
muscle thickness measurements, decreased subjective recovery, decreased sex drive. Again, things that we all would expect, but nice to see published. There was another case study that had, they showed strength measurements, which was cool to see in like compound lifts, squat, bench, deadlifts.
Oh, 1RMs or like rep maxes?
I believe it was 1RMs. Yeah.
Oh my God. Who
Yeah.
approved that
I know
one?
it sounds horrible.
Like, hey, I know you're tired, but
It sounds awful.
I just wouldn't do it. But
No, I wouldn't do either.
I'm not going to pull my fucking adductor off the
No.
bone for you assholes.
But the absolute strength decreased, obviously,
Yes.
right? But relative strength was very stable. It decreased just a hair, but within measurement error, daily fluctuations, et cetera.
Yeah.
Pretty much maintained relative strength. which is
Relative
nice.
strength is insanely body fat dependent, which is why a lot of sports in which relative strength is highly beneficial, like gymnastics, for example, people are fucking lean.
Very lean.
And you're like, what is it about gymnastics that requires you to be lean? It's like, it's not anything about how the body looks or anything. It's just the fact that like when you lose 5 pounds, but you lose a little bit of strength, you have to lift 5 pounds less around.
Yeah.
It's a different ball
It's
game.
worth it.
And sometimes it really is worth it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is brutal. You think about like, just a quick aside, bodybuilders bitch about like, oh my God, we have the hardest job in the world because we're always fucking starving. We got to go train, super low body fat.
Mhm.
Think of sports like wrestling and gymnastics, where not only do they have to diet, often to brutally low body fats, often for extended periods of time, often
Mhm.
sustaining it through like seasons of competition,
Yeah.
but also they also have to perform an insanely high skill
Yeah.
in the sport of wrestling. And someone else is trying to hurt you
Yeah.
and you have to fight them off.
Crazy.
And in gymnastics, you are looking at millimeters of perfection. Like bodybuilders go on stage and do this, you know, like, yeah, posing's a thing for sure.
Yeah.
But like, man, anytime I think I have it hard, I'm like, gymnasts exist.
Yeah.
Fuck all that.
Yeah,
man.
dude. It's crazy.
Mega respect.
And you know from experience, right? You wrestled for a long time.
I thought you were going to say I was a gymnastics. I was what
should've.
we would call an unpaid recreational gymnastics coach, like stared from the bleachers
Yes.
with
Sounds like the right title for that.
binoculars.
Yeah, of course.
I had lots of tips for the boys, but they never did want to hear me out. The trench coat wasn't
That's too
helping.
bad. Oh, okay.
anyone. I was
I
trying to use it for anonymity, but it just singled me out as a pervert.
Oh, okay. Unfortunate.
Yes, I did wrestle. And so wrong.
Right,
I was just an admirer of the sport. The boys that did it.
Yeah. Licking your lips was unrelated, right? Like that was its own separate.
Dry lips. You're like, Mike, do you know that girls do gymnastics? I'm like, I had no idea.
What?
Quite honestly, uninteresting to me. Well, bless those young ladies,
Yeah.
wherever they are.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, where are the boys? Okay, back to the conversation. Jesus Christ, Scott, I'm slipping.
That's what happens. Third one of the day here, you start to lose it.
Uh-huh.
I did lose it a long time ago, really. What else are we learning from these cases? Or anything that is curious?
Yeah. I'll say one thing like that,
Yes,
and then
please.
one other thing I think is interesting to share. Well, maybe two interesting things. So,
Sure.
only 2 of the 15 competitors that were included in this review reported posing practice, which could just be they just didn't report it.
Yeah.
Right? Totally. But that also maybe they didn't think it was important enough to report potentially, or maybe they didn't practice. I know there's plenty of competitors that don't practice posing at all.
You can tell.
But just quickly to
I'm
say
probably
that
one of them. No, I do practice. I just dog shit athleticism and it just sucks. Yeah.
it's hard, man. And like but it's so important. So that's
it's easy to get the basics down. It's really difficult to optimize the posing for the body structure and make it look like Jared Feather type of shit. Where you're like,
he's mastered it, right?
Yeah, dude, he doesn't even practice that much. Usually he's just super fucking athletic and gifted.
Yeah. And then there's like the endurance component. You think like WNBF Worlds, I mean, they were holding those poses for
ass.
Crazy.
And dude, and you're thinking during the time, like, I have a good physique. You assholes are ruining it.
Yeah, right. Right. It's crazy. But yeah, so like if I just want to highlight that just to essentially emphasize posing is super important. Please make sure you're practicing it if you want to compete. The other thing is, they're not well, actually one of them was a case study, but there's a couple like peak week things that we've seen. That peak week is so hard to like, you think bodybuilding in general is hard to study. Peak week is so hard because it's so individual. It seems like, you talk to experienced coaches and they'll say not just are different people different preps are different with what people seem to respond best to.
They do this thing a lot of times where they start putting fluids and carbs into you and they watch how you respond to them and they'll adjust on the margins.
Yeah.
Which is actually really sharp.
Yeah.
But the adjusting on the margins algorithm is often either some combination of voodoo or undisclosed because it's trade secret.
Sure.
So we don't learn much about how that works.
It's so hard. Yeah. So there's been a little bit, basically it's so far has been limited to, there's some depletion protocol and then some carb refeeding protocol. Does this actually lead to changes in muscle thickness or something? And generally it has, which is cool. Mm-hmm. There's been, the Bearcat case study showed that. Did you ever see the photo silhouette study where they had people do this carb up thing and then they were stage ready bodybuilders basically, right? And a bodybuilding judge had this scale in front of him. It was Day Moraes was the author, I think 2019, that if you look at the paper, you can see the scale. It's got 7 bodybuilders and it ranges from like dude who's never lifted to Ronnie Coleman. And there's only 7, right? So you can imagine there's a big difference with each level of the scale. And he's just looking at which of these does this competitor most resemble? And does that change after the big refeeding day?
Whoa, that's an interesting way to
crazy.
That.
But it's also really cool because it's so ecologically valid. Like what you care about is what the judge thinks.
Yes.
And if they think you look visually bigger, that's what matters.
Are the 7 gradations good enough to pick up the difference in glycogen storage? Or? Yikes.
I have a hard time. But I mean, they did see a significant difference, which is impressive to me.
It is really a thing where maybe a lot of this is mental and probably is. But if I'm like, haven't trained for a few days, traveling, not sleeping a ton, and not eating a lot of carbs, in my case, like haven't injected in a while, I feel tiny.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not because the scale says 225 or whatever.
Sure.
But like when people like sometimes in the street, like random cities, people are like, dude, you're really jacked. I'm like, no, I'm not. And then just like when your training is going well, you're carbed up, you're lean, full.
Yeah.
Post workout, you walk from the gym to the car.
Yeah.
And someone's like, dude, you look jacked. You're like, fuck you fucking feel jacked.
I do. Yeah.
Like, yeah, maybe somebody could pick that up on one of those scales.
And you know what also made me feel more confident about it was last month, whenever Worlds was. Did you see Steve Hall's pictures when he was flat the day before his rapid backload? He looked so small. And like Steve's gigantic, right?
In real life, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. Like he's super, super jacked, but I've never seen somebody that flat. It was crazy.
Yeah. He really pushed the pedal.
Working with Cliff Wilson, that'll happen, right?
Yes.
And then him carved up on stage, he looked incredible. But like the difference there made me think, maybe you could see the difference on this little silhouette scale thing,
Yes.
So yeah, it does seem like, carb loading has some sort of effect to increase that. Kai Homer has done some cool studies.
Okay. Very cool. I'm familiar.
He has, there's one that was basically testing that same kind of topic that found a similar thing. Does seem to increase it, but only 4 people, so hard to say too much, but he's trying to fight the good fight for the peak week stuff. Yeah. But yeah, it's tough. So that's kind of my shameless plug for my case study that I was fortunate that systematic review was out already and I could look and see all the stuff that people didn't do. And
was your case study on yourself?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So very
Did
easy
you
to
fudge
get
the
through
numbers to
IRB.
make sure you look fucking sweet?
I should do that.
This young man gained muscle and strength.
I should do that. No, Dr. Zordos, if you're watching this, I'm not going to do that. Not going to do
You
it.
got to put a ton of shit like encumbered by his massive genitals, he still managed to get to the posing stage. Like, why is this in here? You're like, well, it's just me reporting a fact.
Yeah, come on. Peer review, of course, that's going to get through.
Peer review is when you show off. You feel me?
Exactly. But yeah, that as humbly as I can possibly say this, it will be the most comprehensive case study that has been done.
Well, that wasn't very humble at all.
That's
awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited for it. We had tons of baseline testing before I started dieting. We did everything through the entire dieting period, starting in April.
Wow.
Through the end of my season last month, and we're continuing until we restore baseline levels in the recovery period. So like we'll have everything detailed. The amount of measurements we're taking is ridiculous, and I'm so tired of doing all the testing.
That's good.
But
earn that shit.
Yeah, but it'll be really, really cool. And what my hope is that it will inspire future case studies that report similar things. Like not all of this is novel, right? Just to be clear. Some of them that we're reporting are novel, but not everything. But my hope is that we get more and more stuff that eventually we can meta-analyze it and get like something we can properly have some sort of takeaway from.
Yeah, because
right?
you do 20 case studies and all of them very comprehensive. You could start using that in a pooled fashion of being like, oh, like we can actually like start to delineate some relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also want it to be, you read, if you read one of these case studies, right? Sometimes it just feels like, I don't know, there's got to be more to the story.
Yes.
Like it just, does this really like for me, right? I would read these case studies because I'm interested in bodybuilding. Like maybe I want to do that one day, whatever. What am I getting myself into? So I read a case study and it's like, oh, you just track your nutrition and take a DEXA scan at the start and the end. And that's okay, cool. It's easy. But yeah, there's a lot more going on.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that mine can kind of illustrate that and be useful, not just from a research perspective, but to like the everyday bodybuilding enthusiast as well. We'll see.
Sure. Dude, that's fucking great, man. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
We are super, super excited to have that be published. Are you going to publish it somewhere internally? Or are you going to go to a journal? What's going on with that? We
most likely will pre-print it once it's ready, which will be a bit because like we still got to go through the rest of the recovery period. That is TBD how long that will be because my dumbass decided to make it until we restore baseline levels. So, which is great.
Never.
But yeah, which is great. But
baseline levels of what? Like testosterone, things like that? How's that coming along?
I haven't analyzed them yet.
Okay.
So
we'll go upstairs. We'll pop you a couple needles, bro. You'll be right back at it.
Resource wise, it's easier to analyze a lot at the same time.
Yes.
So that's why we just kind of chilled for a minute. But like certain things I don't want to be restored to baseline, like fat thickness measurements. Right. But things like eating behavior questionnaire stuff, hormones, muscle thickness, some things like that, that are like the things that you're probably going to decrease that you don't want them to, right? We'll let those kind of come back up to baseline, assuming that they do. Hopefully they do. And then we'll be
I'll say this, man, there's a decent probability that if and when you publish this, hopefully when, potentially we could have a chat with you. And that would be something like the most measured bodybuilding prep ever.
That'd be amazing.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. I would love to do that. Yeah. It's, it will be, right? If we, as long as we get it out there, which I see no reason why we can't, it's really just a matter of whenever it's done. And the writing shouldn't be too overly difficult because it's one person and the analysis shouldn't be too overly difficult because it's one person. And,
no statistics required. It's summary stats only.
Yeah, a lot of it's just time series stuff. Yep. And, we'll look at some relationships. That's one thing I'm really excited about too that hasn't been done is like, well, what's the relationship between your performance in the gym and your hormonal stuff or your eating behavior stuff or all those, we can look at so much different correlational data that again is not going to say what's causing what, but like it still is interesting.
Hypothesis generating
100%.
Gives us ideas to test later.
Yeah.
I'll say this one very categorical thing before I sign us off. If you ever want to be back in the studio with us and you've cut your hair, just pretend you're dead to us.
Okay. That's fair.
Just really straight up. Scott, we agree?
Yeah, for sure.
They're like, oh, Jake from Data Driven Strength. I'm like, never met the guy.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
I knew a great man before with long hair, but it's long since passed.
Yeah.
Anyway, if people want to get more hair care tips, if they want to know how to get jacked and how to get strong and how to be a scientist, where can they find you?
Probably Instagram is the best place. It's kind of where everything is at. It's just Jake Data Driven Strength on Instagram. You can also
you guys
check
are like
out
a fucking army with that shit.
Yeah, right. It's standardized. Taking over the world. I also have more recently started a podcast with my friend Colby Souza, who just...
I thought you were going to say OnlyFans.
Nah,
Scott, cut the camera. Okay, sorry, please continue.
So this, I started a podcast with my friend Colby, who
recently got a PhD. Yeah, huge congratulations to Colby.
Huge congrats. He's the man. Genuinely the nicest, most amazing person I've ever met in my life.
That's all I've heard from several folks. That's all I've ever heard.
It's
incredible. Nice when you hear that about someone, unless it turns out to be like Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
You know, everyone said that, but then...
Yeah, well, I mean, the jury's still out. Like,
all jokes.
The jury's still out. Colby's still young.
Or still young? I thought you meant on Bill Cosby. I was like, is that really true?
But yeah,
plenty of time to fuck up.
we have a podcast now. We're only a couple months in, but it's called The Training Arc, which is very anime inspired. Are
you into anime,
dude? I have Naruto on my arm. I got a Dragon Ball.
Scott, are we seeing this?
Yeah, I got all kinds of.
Yeah, the channel's gonna love you.
I'm the biggest nerd you've ever met.
My man.
Yeah.
Dude, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So folks can check out that podcast on
it's on YouTube. It's
YouTube.
on, should be on, unless I screwed up the uploading system. It should be on all your main podcast platforms.
Yes. What does it say? That wherever you listen to your podcast.
Yeah. It should be. I found out early on I didn't do it right for Apple. So I had to fix that because that's a popular one.
Yeah.
But so.
Very cool. Dude, a huge pleasure. Best wishes in recovering from your contest prep.
Thanks.
And hopefully we'll see you again.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing. Huge honor. I've been obviously followed your work for a super long time. So
honor's all mine. Thank you so much. Peace, homies.